Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into something bigger than your student loan balance, louder than your neighbor's leaf blower, and definitely bloodier than your last attempt at DIY home improvement. Welcome to the Roman Colosseum, not the travel brochure version with tour guides and ice cream stands. No, tonight we're heading straight into the dusty, roaring heart of ancient Roman entertainment, where the seats were stone, the crowd was ruthless, and the halftime show sometimes involved actual lions. Before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy drifting off to sleep while learning things you can later bore people with at brunch. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I'm guessing somewhere between just resting my eyes and accidentally pulled an all-nighter again. Now dim those lights, click on a fan for that soothing white noise, tuck yourself in, and make peace with the fact that tonight, things are going to get colossally weird. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it really felt like to be inside the Colosseum, not as a tourist, but as a regular Roman citizen? Or worse, a gladiator? What did the arena smell like after a triple lion matinee and a chariot pile-up? Did people tailgate before a public execution? What was the Roman equivalent of stadium nachos? Did anybody actually survive long enough to retire from gladiator life? Or was that just something Hollywood made up to help Russell Crowe sleep at night? And most importantly, what kind of lunatic builds a 50,000-seat murder dome and says, "Let's fill it with crocodiles"? Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 80 AD. The Colosseum has just opened. You're in the crowd. You don't know if you're a guest or the entertainment. Either way, you're going to need a strong stomach, a decent toga, and probably a spare chicken leg for bribing the guards. Welcome to ancient Rome. Let's dive in. You're packed shoulder to shoulder with 50,000 Romans, all shouting, sweating, and occasionally tossing snacks. The air smells like roasted meat, spilled wine, and the faint metallic tang of impending doom. Congratulations. This is your entertainment for the day. Hope you brought a cushion. You didn't. Which is why you're currently sitting on a marble slab that's approximately the same temperature as a jealous ex's heart. Cold, hard, and ready to ruin your spine by lunchtime. The stone seating wraps around the massive arena like an amphitheater designed by someone who hated comfort but loved acoustics. And it works. You can hear a man 3 rows down muttering about the quality of the anchovies in his sandwich, and somewhere behind you, someone is loudly discussing whether lions are technically cats. You try to focus on your breathing, which is difficult because the man to your left smells like he bathed in garlic, and the woman on your right just sneezed directly into her wine. The sun is blazing, because of course it is. You're in the upper tiers, under what the Romans generously call the cheap seats, more accurately described as the solar oven. There's shade, sure, but it's about 20 feet behind you, reserved for senators, magistrates, and people who can pronounce the word aqueduct without spitting. There's a system, of course. Seats are assigned based on class. The closer you are to the sand, the more likely you are to be important, rich, or dead by noon. The emperor sits in a gilded box with a private awning, 2 servants fanning him, and what appears to be a small personal cheese tray. You have a damp rag you're pretending is a hat. Let's talk about noise. It's constant. There's no soothing announcer voice here, just 50,000 people yelling at once, vendors shouting about olives, fans chanting a gladiator's name, someone behind you yelling, "Gratus," like it's a spell to summon free stuff. There's even a guy playing panpipes off-key because he lost a bet and no one stopped him. Next to you, a kid is gnawing on something that might be a roasted dormouse or might be a very unfortunate rat. He offers you a bite. You politely decline and try not to gag as he pulls out a second one from a greasy pouch. This isn't a short visit. Spectacles can last all day, sometimes for days. You've brought a half loaf of bread, a jug of watered-down wine, and a few dried figs you forgot to wash. You're already down 1 fig it rolled under a sandal and is now part of history. You mourn it quietly. Suddenly, the crowd roars. You jolt upright, spilling a bit of wine onto your tunic, which is now a permanent part of your laundry regrets. A gate creaks open. From the belly of the Colosseum, A man in armor walks out, raising a short sword in one hand and what might be a homemade lucky charm in the other. The crowd knows his name. You don't, but you cheer anyway. It's safer that way. He's followed by another man, taller, meaner looking, holding a net and a trident. You suddenly remember reading something about Retiari, the net guys, and you begin to root for him because he looks like he's not wearing pants, which you respect. The fight is brutal, fast, messy. There is absolutely no sportsmanship, no referee, and no timeouts. It's not choreographed. It's not fake. These are two grown men trying very hard to avoid dying in front of an audience that's already rating their performance like a Yelp review. Blood spatters the sand. The guy next to you claps with one hand while continuing to butter a loaf of bread with the other. The crowd gasps, then laughs, then cheers, then boos, all within 30 seconds. It's like watching Twitter happen live, only with more violence and fewer opinions on oat milk. Between fights, there's a break. Vendors rush through the aisles. You buy what is place, described as goat cheese on a stick, and immediately regret every decision that led you here. It's salty, suspiciously warm, and possibly cursed. Nearby, two men begin arguing loudly about who would win in a fight between a crocodile and a German. They've both had too much wine and not enough common sense. You lean back, close your eyes, and pretend you're somewhere else. Somewhere quiet, with cushions and bathrooms that aren't just a trench. A trumpet sounds. Time for the next act. You've only been here 3 hours, and you're already sunburnt, partially deaf, and inexplicably sticky. You brace yourself for whatever insanity is next. Animal fights, public executions, chariot crashes, all of the above? You glance at the sky. The Valerium, that giant retractable sunshade, is fluttering in the breeze, held up by a complex system of ropes and very sweaty sailors. One false tug, and you'll be eating canvas for lunch. Someone in the crowd stands to stretch. They get pelted with half an onion. Lesson learned. The day drags on. You nap briefly with your mouth open and wake up to a beetle crawling across your knee. Somewhere below, a man dressed as Hercules is trying to wrestle a bear. The bear is winning. Eventually, you start to feel like part of the crowd, sunburned, dehydrated, morally conflicted, but also weirdly invested. You cheer, you boo, you steal a grape from the man in front of you. He notices, shrugs, and hands you another. By the time the sun begins to dip below the rim of the arena, you're sticky with sweat, hoarse from yelling, and a little too emotionally attached to a gladiator named Thrax the Slightly Unstable. Your first day at the Colosseum is over. You stand up, knees cracking, back screaming, and dignity somewhere near the arena floor. And somehow, you already know you'll be back tomorrow. Forget hot dogs and nachos. Roman spectators snacked on olives, garum-drenched fish, and suspiciously crunchy bread. Some even brought a portable grill. You, unfortunately, just dropped your only fig into a vomit-covered stairwell. It was your best fig. You'd been saving it, cradling it gently like a fruit-based emotional support animal. And now it's lying face down in the remains of someone else's lunch, someone else's regrets, and probably someone else's stomach lining. It's gone. You say a quiet, internal goodbye and pretend it didn't happen. Around you, the Colosseum is in full culinary chaos. It's not a food court, it's a feeding frenzy. Vendors are shoving their way through the crowd, baskets on their backs, yelling out a string of aggressively sung product names: salted chickpeas, spiced dormice, mystery meat in a leaf. One man passes by with what appears to be a bucket of snails. Another offers a jar of pickled fish heads. Someone, somewhere, is definitely selling what they claim is imported Egyptian cheese, which smells like it committed a minor crime. You do your best to stay optimistic. Let's talk about garum. You can't escape it. It's in everything. Garum is a fermented fish sauce, think ketchup, but with more anchovy trauma and a splash of moral ambiguity. It's the Romans' favorite condiment. They pour it on meat, vegetables, bread, and probably each other. One guy 2 rows down is dunking an entire boiled egg in a cup of it like it's fondue night. You nearly gag, but he seems happy. You're beginning to realize that Roman stadium snacks are not about freshness, or temperature, or any particular attention to basic food safety. They're about availability, portability, and how well the food pairs with cheering for a man about to fight a tiger. Take the bread, for example. It's technically edible. That's the best you can say about it. It's dense, rock-hard, and has a crust so sharp it could double as a weapon. You watched someone earlier use it to knock a coin off the ledge. Impressive aim. Terrible dental plan. You gnaw your way through half a loaf and decide to give your jaw a break before it files a formal complaint. Some of the wealthier citizens bring their own food in delicate little baskets. Figs, honey cakes, roasted meats, and in one case, an actual live chicken, presumably for roasting mid-match. You stare longingly at the chicken. It stares back. You share a moment. You briefly consider befriending a patrician just for their snack access. But they're seated under the valerium in the shaded, perfumed, nothing splashes me here zone. You're in the sunburn pit with the garlic-scented masses, chewing stale lentil patties and pretending you don't hear someone vomiting behind you. And oh, the vomiting. The term vomitorium might be misleading, no. It's not a place Romans went to purge and make room for more food. It's just an exit tunnel. But the reality, people throw up anyway. Not on purpose. Just as a side effect of sunstroke, garum overload, or watching someone get impaled while holding a sausage, you're now cautious about where you step, especially after the last time your sandal slid on something unidentifiable. Let's just say the fig didn't stand a chance. It's not all bad though. Someone hands you a skewer of grilled meat that could be lamb, could be rat. You decide not to ask. It's hot, salty, and surprisingly comforting. You eat it quickly, then realize too late that it was wrapped in a lettuce leaf that may or may not have been washed since the reign of Tiberius. Behind you, a woman unwraps a honey-soaked date pastry and promptly drops half of it down her tunic. She shrugs, retrieves it, and continues eating. You respect the resilience. Roman snack time is not for the weak. Let's not forget the drinks. Water is for the boring and the dehydrated. Everyone here is sipping watered wine just strong enough to make things fuzzy, not strong enough to make you miss a bear versus gladiator match. Some bring their own flasks. Others purchase overpriced clay cups filled with suspiciously fruity concoctions. You buy one and take a sip. It's wine. Maybe. Also maybe old foot rinse with a splash of plum. The man beside you offers you a pickled egg. It smells like it was boiled in ancient regrets, but you accept it anyway. It's chewy. You're not sure you're chewing the right part. You power through. The Colosseum doesn't stop for meals. There's no intermission, no polite, please finish your sandwich before the next beheading. You eat while lions chase criminals. You nibble while gladiators duel. You sip wine while someone gets trampled by an elephant. It's the ancient Roman version of dinner and a show, only with more blood and a significantly higher risk of food poisoning. By late afternoon, your stomach is performing a cautious interpretive dance. Your tunic is stained, your breath smells like fermented olives, and you're beginning to understand why Romans invented togas. They're loose, forgiving, and excellent at hiding snack-related shame. Still, despite the chaos, the questionable hygiene, and the near-constant threat of accidental snail ingestion, there's something comforting about it all. Everyone here, rich, poor, drunk, sunburned, is united by the shared experience of eating weird food while cheering for professional sword fights. It's messy, it's loud, it's slightly dangerous. And somehow, it's tradition. You pop the last roasted chickpea into your mouth, lick your garum-coated fingers, and raise your clay cup to the next act. Let the carnage and the digestion begin. You're not just here for the blood, you're here for the drama. Gladiators have fan clubs, brand endorsements, read pottery with their faces on it, and enough gossip to rival modern reality TV. You, meanwhile, are just hoping not to faint before lunch. It's easy to think of gladiators as just muscle-bound sword swingers in sandals. But in ancient Rome, they were walking, grunting, bleeding celebrities. Each one had a backstory, a signature move, and in some cases, a catchphrase that made crowds go absolutely feral. It's like if MMA fighters, TikTok stars, and soap opera villains had a toga-clad baby. You learn this quickly, because the woman next to you, a merchant's wife wearing 6 layers of jewelry and a look that says, "My husband is boring," has been shouting the name Crixus since dawn. She's got a wax tablet with his stats, a little clay figurine of him painted by hand, and a scarf with his initials. You're beginning to think this might not be her first time. Crixus emerges from the gate, covered in oil and confidence. He raises his sword, and the crowd loses its collective mind. Somewhere in the distance, a child is crying, possibly from fear, possibly from excitement, possibly from being accidentally elbowed by his father during the pre-fight chant. It's all part of the experience. Let's break it down. Gladiators were often slaves or prisoners of war, but once they entered the arena, they could, if they survived, rise to fame, fortune, and slightly better sleeping arrangements. A successful gladiator could earn fans, win freedom, and even marry rich widows with questionable taste in men. You watch as Crixus circles his opponent, a younger, more nervous, looking fighter, wearing armor that doesn't quite fit, and a helmet so large he looks like a terrified soup can. The crowd murmurs. You hear someone behind you whisper, "That's Marcus the carpenter," they say. "He took up the sword after losing a chisel bet." You choose to believe it. The announcer, an overexcited man with a scroll and a flair for dramatic pauses, lists off their achievements. Crixus has 18 wins, 1 draw, and a rumoured affair with the governor's wife. Marcus has enthusiasm, and a mother in the crowd holding a chicken for good luck. Fame in the Colosseum wasn't just about survival, it was about style, about how you moved, about how long you could hold a pose after a dramatic kill without pulling a hamstring. The crowd didn't just want a fight, they wanted a show. They wanted blood sprayed in arcs. They wanted slow-motion combat before slow motion was invented. They wanted to see a man fall to his knees in the sand and dramatically shout something like, "Is this not the justice of Rome?" You begin to understand why people come back every week. Fans write poems. Lovers send letters. There are amphorae decorated with their favorite gladiator's face, often painted heroically, never mind that in real life, he smells like goat and regret. Wealthy patrons sponsor fighters the way modern influencers get free teeth-whitening kits. Except in this case, the free gift is usually a second-hand helmet and the promise of slightly less moldy bread. Some gladiators even endorse products. You once saw a jar of olive paste with the inscription, "Approved by Varro the Victorious." You bought it. It was terrible, but you spread it on toast anyway and felt briefly powerful. Back in the arena, Crixus and Marcus are locked in a dramatic clash. There's shouting, grunting, clashing of steel, a dramatic roll through the sand. Someone in the crowd faints, possibly from the excitement, possibly from the smell. A vendor sells authentic gladiator sweat in tiny vials. You're pretty sure it's just water and shame. You look around. Everyone is invested. A group of teenagers is chanting for Marcus. An old senator is placing bets with the seriousness of a man negotiating a treaty. 2 drunk uncles in the corner are reenacting the previous fight using breadsticks. One breaks, tension builds, and then the moment. Crixus strikes. Marcus goes down, the crowd rises, gasps, cries. A few dramatic swoons. One woman yells, "I knew it," even though no one asked. Crixus stands over his opponent, sword raised, waiting. This is where the real drama happens. The Emperor, lounging in, his shaded box like a bored house cat, will now decide, live or die. Thumbs are involved. Maybe up, maybe down, maybe sideways, historians aren't even sure. But the gesture matters less than the suspense. The crowd watches, breath held, garlic forgotten. The Emperor gestures, mercy. The arena erupts. People cheer, cry, and throw what might be edible at the sand. Marcus is dragged off, bruised but breathing. Crixus basks in the glory, soaked in sweat, sand, and the desperate adoration of half the city. And you? You clap. You cheer. You shout his name with the rest. Because even if you don't fully understand the rules or why everyone smells like anchovies, there's something undeniable about watching a man in a leather skirt become a legend. Welcome to the Colosseum. Where blood is spilled, heroes are made, and the real winners are the ones who get turned into dinnerware. You wake up in a damp cell, reeking of sweat and ambition. Today's breakfast is stale bread and existential dread. You've got a duel scheduled at noon. Try not to cry in front of the rookie recruits. Your back aches, your shoulder pops. Something bit you in the night, possibly a rat, possibly a very aggressive flea. The floor is straw, if you can call it that. It's more like damp optimism scattered across stone. The walls sweat condensation. You sweat everything else. Welcome to the Ludus, the gladiator training school. Equal parts gym, prison, and ancient motivational poster that just says, "Don't die." You sit up, take stock of your injuries, 4 bruises, 1 scratch you don't remember getting, and a left foot that's currently asleep. You nudge it awake, and pull on your tunic, which smells like history and failure. There's no mirror, but you imagine you look exactly like a man who's been punched for a living since he lost a bet 2 years ago. Breakfast is served in the courtyard. By served, of course, we mean tossed in your general direction by a tired slave who's already regretting his life choices. You get half a loaf of yesterday's bread, a cup of tepid barley gruel, and one dried fig if you're lucky, which you're not. You eat in silence, surrounded by a dozen other men who look like various stages of broken pottery. No one talks much in the morning. The veterans are too sore. The rookies are too nervous. One new recruit asks if training will be easy today. Everyone laughs and someone throws a chicken bone at him. It's the closest thing to camaraderie you'll see all week. Let's talk training. Training starts at sunrise. You line up in the arena behind the Ludus, eyes stinging from the dust, skin already warming under the Roman Sunday. The Lanista, the head trainer and former gladiator himself, steps out like a hangover in human form. He has one eye, no patience, and a voice that could curdle milk. He yells your names. You don't correct him. You're not here to be known. You're here to not die before payday. The exercises begin. First, the basics. Sword drills, shield blocks, and how not to accidentally stab yourself, refresher courses. You run laps in full armor. You spar with wooden weapons that are heavier than the real thing. This is supposed to make you stronger. It mostly makes you cry into your helmet. Then come the specialty drills. You're a secutor, big shield, short sword, heavy armor. Your job is to move like an angry fridge and hope you can pin your opponent before your knees betray you. Across from you is a retiarius, no armor, just a net, a trident, and the smug grin of someone who's faster than you and knows it. You clash. He dodges. You lunge. He trips you with the net. Again. The Lanista sighs like a man who's seen this before because he has. Every day since Trajan was in diapers. He mutters something about replacing you with a dog and tells you to hit the sand again. You do, face first. Around you, others are sparring, sweating, shouting. One guy breaks his nose. Another dislocates a shoulder. You watch a recruit throw up in his helmet. He puts it back on. You vow never to borrow equipment again. Around midday, you get a break. Not for rest, for instruction. A visiting philosopher comes to explain the virtues of courage and the nobility of combat. You nod solemnly while chewing on a grape you stole from the food cart. No one's listening. Someone in the back is asleep. You envy him. Then it's weapons inspection. You're handed the sword you'll be using in your match. It's real, sharp, slightly nicked, possibly cursed. You check the grip, the balance, and the odds of faking an injury to get out of this. Slim. The fight is scheduled for noon. You're oiled. Not for performance, for appearance. The Romans want you shiny. You smell like olive oil, terror, and whatever the guy next to you ate for breakfast. The dressing room, which is really just a bench near a goat, is silent. Your name is called. You step into the arena. The roar hits you like a wall. Thousands of spectators. Some cheering, some booing. Some just pointing and eating grapes like this is the ancient version of reality TV, and you're the guy about to be voted off the island with a trident. You raise your sword, you strike a pose. You try not to pass out from adrenaline. Across the sand, your opponent does the same. You've seen him before. Big, mean, missing 2 fingers. Known for yelling things in Gaulish no one understands, but everyone's too afraid to ask. The match begins. You clash. Sand kicks up. Steel rings. Your body moves on instinct: block, dodge, strike, breathe, repeat. The crowd is screaming. Your heart is pounding. Your helmet is crooked. Your arm is bruised. Your left shin is now a mystery. And then a hit. Yours. He stumbles. You stand over him. It's your moment. You glance up. The editor, the man in charge, raises his hand. Thumbs up. He lives. You breathe. The crowd erupts. You've survived. You limp back to the holding room, bleeding slightly, grinning stupidly. A cup of watered wine is thrust into your hand. Someone slaps your back. The Lannister even nods once. You consider it a standing ovation. Later, you'll soak in a cold bath. The water will turn pink. You'll wince when you sit down. You'll lie on your straw mattress and stare at the ceiling, wondering how long you can keep this up. But for now, you're alive. You're fed. You're respected. Maybe even admired. And tomorrow? It all starts again. Before the fighting starts, there's music, dancing, animal processions, and a guy dressed as Jupiter who might have had too much wine. It's part circus, part religious ritual, part pre-slaughter pep rally. It begins just after sunrise. You're already sweating, already squinting, and already regretting that second helping of fermented lentils at breakfast. The Colosseum hums with anticipation, 50,000 Romans packed in tight, fidgeting, elbowing, and whispering theories about which exotic animal might explode out of a trapdoor this year. Some say lions, some say ostriches. One man insists it's going to be a giraffe on stilts. He has wine. A lot of it. Then the horns. A blare of brass that feels like someone just tried to serenade your ears with a trumpet full of gravel. The crowd jumps to attention, and the ceremonies begin. First out, the musicians. A glorious cacophony of flutes, lyres, drums, and one man with a triangle who seems deeply unsure why he's here. The band parades across the arena floor, playing something between a military march and an off-brand wedding tune. It's hard to tell whether this is meant to inspire awe, fear, or spontaneous shoulder dancing. Behind them come the dancers. Brightly dressed youths, twirling ribbons and tossing petals that immediately get trampled by a goat who wandered off script. Nobody notices. Nobody cares. One child performs a cartwheel and is immediately cheered like he just conquered Gaul. Another trips, rolls, and takes down half a row of tambourine players. The crowd loves it. Then come the animals. Oh yes, this part is always dramatic. You hear the distant roar before you see it. A cage is wheeled in behind it. Lions. Or one lion. Or possibly a very large, angry cat with ambitions. The beast snarls. The crowd gasps. Someone throws a sausage in its direction, possibly as an offering, possibly as a test. The lion ignores it and glares at the nearest senator. There are elephants too massive, uncertain, and visibly annoyed about being made to wear feathered hats. Behind them? A giraffe draped in silks. You stare. The drunk man next to you weeps tears of vindicated joy. Then comes the religious part. Because you can't kick off a blood sport festival without a good old-fashioned offering to the gods. Enter the priests, or at least men in priest costumes carrying incense, chanting hymns, and leading a white bull toward a temporary altar. The bull looks deeply unconvinced. One priest holds up a dagger. The crowd goes silent. The bull takes a dramatic step sideways and poops in protest. This is interpreted as a blessing. The crowd cheers. The gods are clearly pleased. Now the real show begins. Enter the personification of Jupiter, king of the gods. He's played by an actor, a very drunk actor, wearing platform sandals, a beard made of horsehair, and a golden robe that's caught on something behind him. He's meant to bless the games. He instead blesses a vendor, hugs a confused child, and briefly loses his balance on a patch of vomit. Everyone claps. It's not just entertainment, it's theatre. The Colosseum isn't just a stadium, it's a stage. And this opening ceremony is the opening act. Every movement is part of a greater message. Look at the glory of Rome. Look at the power of the empire. Look at this man trying to juggle flaming sticks while dressed as Mars. Because yes, there are jugglers, flaming, torches, painted faces, and acrobats who have clearly never rehearsed near wild animals. One accidentally backflips into a camel. The camel is unimpressed. Then the final processional. The gladiators. Dozens of them, marching in formation across the sand. Each one steps forward, salutes the emperor, and declares the traditional line, Ave, Imperator, morituri te salutant. Hail, Emperor, those who are about to die salute you. It's both chilling and dramatic. Some say it with gusto. Some say it like they're reading the fine print on a very bad contract. One man says it and immediately throws up into his own helmet. Nerves, probably. The crowd eats it up, figuratively, and literally. Someone passes you a stick of fried cheese and you accept it because it's better than thinking about what's about to happen. There's a pause, a breath. The sun rises higher. The air is tense. And then boom, a loud crack. Fireworks. Or something pretending to be fireworks. Smoke fills the arena. Doves are released. One flies directly into a pillar and drops like a beanbag. Everyone pretends not to notice. And just like that, the ceremony is over. The horns sound again. The priests retreat. The dancers scatter. Jupiter trips over his robe and is discreetly carried off stage by two very tired ushers. A herald steps forward, scroll in hand, and announces the first match of the day. The crowd roars. The sand is swept. The trapdoors creak open. You clutch your wine. Somewhere below, someone sharpens a blade. The spectacle has officially begun, and you can't help but wonder if next time you might show up late and skip the goat bit. It's noon. Time to execute some criminals. Maybe it's a guy who stole a loaf of bread. Maybe it's someone who committed treason. Either way, it's scheduled between the bear fight and the chariot race. Welcome to Roman justice. The sun is at its peak, beating down like a judgmental god who's just found your search history. You've been sitting in the Colosseum for hours. Your legs are numb, your tunic is stuck to your thighs, and you've just finished a questionable sandwich that may or may not have included pigeon. The crowd is buzzing again, but not with excitement, with morbid curiosity. Because it's time for the Ludi Meridiani, the midday spectacle. Or, more specifically, public execution hour. Think of it as halftime. If your halftime show involved convicted criminals being creatively obliterated for mass entertainment, the ancient Romans didn't just want justice, they wanted a show. And if possible, a bit of slapstick along the way. Let's be clear, the crimes varied wildly. Theft, arson, desertion, fraud, sacrilege, not paying your taxes on time, owning the wrong kind of goat, all potentially punishable by death, depending on how the emperor felt that week. And while Roman courts technically existed, the concept of due process here is more like doomed process. The accused are led into the arena usually in chains, often barefoot, and always looking like they've just realized this is not what community service meant. You shift uncomfortably. There's a part of you that knows this is horrifying. And another part, the part still high on honeyed wine and crowd energy, that's disturbingly fascinated. You're not proud of it. But you're not alone. The first criminal is introduced. His name is Lucius, and he stole a ceremonial dagger from a temple. Why? Because it was shiny. He says he was drunk. He says he regrets it. He's currently dressed in a ridiculous costume to match his crime. The Romans loved thematic execution. If you were caught impersonating a god, you might be dressed as Mercury and then catapulted off a tower. If you were a thief, you might be made to steal from a lion's mouth. Spoiler: the lion does not like to share. Lucius, poor thing, is chained to a post. A performer dressed as Pluto, god of the underworld, gives a Pluto short monologue about justice and fate in iambic pentameter. no less, and then signals the executioner. The executioner, for the record, is wearing more eyeliner than seems strictly necessary. One swing, one cheer. Lucius is no more. Next comes a woman convicted of poisoning her husband. The program claims she did it for love, or money, or because he chewed too loudly. No one knows. The important part is that she'll be tied to a wild animal, probably a bear, and made to atone. You watch, half horrified, half entranced, as the bear lumbers into the arena. It looks confused. It's not its fault. It was kidnapped from the forests of Dacia, and now it's being asked to participate in a morality play. The woman stands tall, proud, and possibly insane. She shouts something about Venus and eternal love, and then the bear growls and the crowd gasps and, well, let's just say things escalate quickly. You can't look. But you do. After her, a man who tried to incite rebellion is sentenced to die by damnatio, ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. This sounds poetic until you realize it just means we're going to feed you to something with claws. The gates? Open. It's a leopard this time. Sleek, fast, beautiful, terrifying. The man tries to run. No one ever gets far. The sand is too deep. The exits are too sealed. The crowd leans in as the leopard pounces. Someone drops a sausage in shock. It is not recovered. Now comes the grand finale, a staged, mythological execution. These are the Romans' favorite. They combine drama, theatre, and a strong dose of irony. The criminal is dressed as a figure from myth, usually someone who dies in a particularly awful way and then reenacts that myth, fatally. Today's victim is playing Icarus. You're not kidding. They've tied feathers to his arms, doused him in wax, and built a small wooden ramp. There's a man with a torch standing nearby. The plan is to light the wax, send him running, and let the metaphor do the rest. He begins his flight. He flails. He screams a bit too realistically. The wax melts, the feathers catch, and the whole thing is somehow both absurd and deeply, deeply unsettling. The crowd bursts into applause. You need a moment. A trumpet blares. A man with a broom and a disturbingly casual attitude shuffles out to clean the sand. A vendor sells wine slushies in goat horns. Children wave little flags. A group of senators nearby begins discussing the odds for the afternoon's chariot race. And just like that, the executions are over. It's like nothing happened. As if blood wasn't just spilled in the name of justice, boredom, and ancient Roman moral theatre. You sit there, dazed, sticky, sunburnt, and vaguely ashamed. Then someone shouts, "Tigers next," and you forget everything. Welcome to the Colosseum, where lunchtime is bloody, judgment is fast, and nobody ever asks if the bear wanted to be here. The Romans called it a venatio. You call it a nature documentary gone violently wrong. Exotic beasts are dragged in from across the empire, and you're sitting in the splash zone. The air smells like sweat, fear, and expensive logistics. Because make no mistake, importing a giraffe from Nubia, a tiger from India, or an angry, underfed hippo from Egypt is no small feat. It requires boats, cages, bribes, and at least 3 guys who are very bad at tying knots. But the Romans do it anyway. Why? Because someone in the front row paid good money to see a cheetah chase a man in a wig across a sand pit. You shift in your seat, wiping fig juice from your tunic, as the gates begin to creak open. There's a low rumble from the crowd. Excitement, dread, indigestion, and then it happens. A lion. Massive, golden, majestic, confused. It steps cautiously onto the sand, sniffing at the air, eyeing the crowd like it's wondering who in this marble death bowl is responsible for dragging it 2,000 miles from home. A few rows back, someone gasps. Someone else cheers. A small child drops his olive and starts crying. You don't blame him. You're not exactly feeling secure about your upper-tier seat that's only slightly above eye level, with something that can leap 8 feet vertically. Then come the others. 2 leopards, tails twitching. A bear that looks like it's just woken up from a nap and is ready to file a complaint. And inexplicably, a pack of hyenas. laughing like they just heard your social security number. The Venators enter next trained animal hunters, armed with spears, nets, and outfits that look like they were designed by someone who once saw a gladiator outfit in a dream and then immediately fell off a horse. These men are celebrities in their own right, less famous than gladiators, but with a better dental survival rate. They move slowly, confidently, whispering commands to one another like a team of ancient zookeepers who just realize the gates don't lock from the outside. Now, here's where things go from mildly concerning to, oh no, oh absolutely not. Because the Romans don't just want to see animals, they want drama. They want exotic beasts pitted against each other in carefully orchestrated chaos. It's like the world's worst version of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, with more blood and significantly fewer ethical guidelines. A deer is released, followed by a panther. There is no mystery about how this is going to go. The panther bounds forward. The deer makes a noble attempt at escape. The crowd leans in. Some cheer for the panther, some root for the deer. One woman is yelling, "Run, Sparkles!" You are deeply concerned that she has named it. It doesn't end well for Sparkles. You glance around. No one seems bothered. People are eating, betting. One guy is juggling grapes. Another is sketching the scene onto parchment like he's planning to frame it later with a label that says, "The one with the ostrich. Stampede." Ah, yes, the ostriches. Because no Roman animal show would be complete without something absurd. Suddenly, 6 ostriches burst onto the arena floor, flapping, screeching, and running in circles like confused ballerinas on roller skates. The crowd loves it. You, however, are trying to remember if ostriches can fly. They cannot, but they can kick. Hard. Cue the comic relief. A man dressed as a mythical hero attempts to battle an ostrich using only a wooden spoon. He gets kicked directly in the ego. The crowd erupts. Someone nearby shouts, "Best comedy since Plautus." Another throws a roll at the ostrich. The ostrich eats it. You are genuinely impressed. Then comes the finale. The grand venatio, the part where it all gets dramatically worse. A massive wooden structure rises from the center of the arena, hoisted by pulleys and teams of slaves. It's painted to look like a forest. There are fake trees, painted rocks. Someone even included a papier-mâché waterfall. The effect is equal parts terrifying and middle school play. From behind the props, a tiger, sleek, orange, beautiful, furious. The hunter steps forward. He's wearing gold-plated armor and the facial expression of someone who just remembered he forgot to update his will. They circle each other. The tiger growls. The hunter raises his spear. You're not sure who to root for. Part of you whispers, "Please let the tiger win." The rest of you remembers this is ancient Rome. The tiger might win, but the audience won't be kind about it. The fight is fast, brutal. Over in minutes. The hunter wins barely. He's bleeding, limping, and clutching his arm like it owes him money. The tiger lies still, beautiful even in death. A child throws a rose onto the sand. The emperor nods approvingly. You sit back, overwhelmed. Because that's the thing about Roman entertainment. It's not just the violence, it's the absurdity, the extravagance, the sheer audacity of a civilization that looked at the animal kingdom and thought, yes, but what if we gave it an audience and sold snacks? You look out over the arena. The sand is soaked. The air smells of blood and roasted almonds. The crowd is already buzzing about the next event. You're just trying to remember if anyone ever checks on the giraffe. Not just for the Circus Maximus. Some lunatics built ramps in the Colosseum to run mock chariot races, which is impressive, until you realize there's no exit ramp and half the drivers are drunk. You can hear them before you see them, the clatter of wheels, the crack of whips, and the faint, panicked shouting of someone realizing they probably shouldn't have bet their life savings on a man named Gaius, no brakes, Brutius. The Colosseum, designed primarily for man versus beast carnage and blood-slick gladiator showdowns, wasn't exactly built with NASCAR in mind. And yet, here you are, sitting in the upper tiers, sipping watery wine, watching a construction crew wheel out a rickety series of ramps that look like they were designed by someone who once read about geometry and immediately forgot it. These mock chariot races aren't the same as the grand, sweeping affairs at the Circus Maximus. No 4-mile loops, no 1,000-horse pageantry, no well-trained crews with uniforms. This is more like an ancient demolition derby where the prize is survival and the sponsor is probably fermented goat's milk. The race begins with much fanfare, a trumpet blast, a lot of shouting, and someone dressed as Mercury dramatically tossing a laurel wreath into the air. It is immediately trampled by a horse. Nobody cares. The gates fly open and out come the chariots. If you're imagining something sleek and elegant, please adjust your expectations downward. These are not the graceful high-speed rigs of the aristocracy. These are splintery, squeaky contraptions that appear to be held together by spit, hope, and one very determined nail. The horses are doing their best. You can tell. They're powerful, muscular, and slightly terrified. You would be too, if your rider was yelling something about destiny while sloshing wine onto the reins. One driver is wearing a helmet made of what looks like a salad bowl. Another is standing on one foot for reasons known only to him and the gods. The first lap is surprisingly smooth. A few tight turns. Some aggressive maneuvering. A brief moment where two chariots try to occupy the same space, and physics says absolutely not. The crowd is on its feet cheering, gasping, occasionally ducking as splinters fly into the stands. Then someone tries the ramp. Yes, the ramp. It's steep. It's narrow. It's a blatant cry for attention. And a man named Marcus the Bold, who is definitely overcompensating for something, decides he's going to soar. He doesn't. He hits the incline at full speed, launches into the air, with a look of pure chaos on his face, and then promptly nosedives into the sand. The chariot explodes like a wicker basket filled with bad decisions. The horses scatter. Marcus gets up, wobbles, bows, and throws up. The crowd roars with approval. This, apparently, is peak entertainment. You take a bite of your salted cheese and try not to think about the logistics. There's no clear finish line, no lap counter, no referee. Just a dozen half-dressed maniacs circling a death pit at breakneck speed while the audience bets on who will die in the funniest way. One man gets dragged halfway across the arena by his own reins. Another accidentally whips the wrong horse. One chariot just catches fire. No one seems alarmed. The commentary from the crowd is relentless. Everyone has a favorite driver. Some cheer by name, others by insult. A woman behind you is screaming, "Turn left, you cabbage," so loudly that even the vendor hawking roasted chickpeas is pausing to watch. You begin to understand the appeal. This isn't about skill, or strategy, or horse handling, finesse. This is pure, unfiltered chaos with a little mythology sprinkled on top. One charioteer is dressed as Achilles, another as Apollo. You're not sure which is which, but one of them just hit a column and is currently being dragged in a circle like a very unlucky piñata. Suddenly, there's a crash, a real one. Two chariots collide head-on near the base of the stands. Wood splinters, sand flies. One wheel bounces dramatically into the air and lands in someone's wine jug. The drivers crawl out, one missing a sandal, the other missing most of his toga. They high-five and immediately start arguing over who caused it. The crowd eats it up. Somewhere, a man in a toga holds up a crude sign, 10/10. You suspect he's not official, but no one stops him. As the race winds down, and by winds down, we mean most of the chariots are now on fire or upside down. A victor is declared. You're not sure how or why. He's the only one still on his feet, technically holding reins, and not currently being trampled. That's good enough for Rome. The crowd applauds. The emperor offers a polite nod, possibly mid-nap. The winner does a lap of honor, dragging half a wheel behind him like a badge of pride. Cleanup begins immediately. Workers sprint out to retrieve broken carts, soothe traumatized horses, and chase down a goat that somehow got loose during the third lap and is now aggressively licking someone's sandals. You sit back, stunned, sandblasted, and slightly exhilarated. Because while it may not be smart, safe, or even sensical, the mock chariot races are undeniably Roman. Bold, reckless, ridiculous, and wildly popular. You sip your wine, crunch a grape, and whisper a quiet thought. Next time, I'm betting on the guy with the salad bowl helmet. Sweat, smoke, blood, perfume, and the distinct scent of someone using lavender oil to mask their fear. You've never inhaled anything quite like it, and frankly, your nostrils may never recover. Let's get something out of the way. The Roman Colosseum is not a place of gentle breezes and citrus freshness. This is not your grandma's herb garden or a luxury spa in Capri. This is 50,000 humans packed into stone bleachers under the blazing Mediterranean sun, all shouting, eating, sweating, and quite frankly leaking in various directions. From the moment you step inside, your nose is assaulted, not gently tapped, assaulted, ambushed, thrown into the back of a metaphorical chariot and dragged across several olfactory war zones. First, there's body odor, and not the polite kind. No, this is ancient body odor, the sort that's been marinating in wool tunics and leather sandals since dawn. Soap exists, sure, but it's made from goat fat and ashes, and nobody's invented deodorant yet. The man next to you smells like he wrestled a pig and lost, twice. The woman behind you smells like she rolled in garum before arriving, and the guy in front of you seems to be giving off a scent best described as smoked regret. And speaking of garum, let's talk about that smell. Garum, for those of you lucky enough not to know, is a fermented fish sauce that Romans put on everything. Bread, beans, fruit, possibly their own children. It's the national condiment and the unofficial cologne of the upper tiers. It smells like if anchovies were left in the sun to rethink their life choices. It's in the air, on the food, and bafflingly on a toga someone is waving like a flag. Every gust of wind is an adventure. Then there's the smell of blood. Yes, actual blood. Not metaphorical, not poetic. Literal, iron-rich, sunshine-baked blood, soaked into the sand and wafting up like a warning. It has a metallic tang, sharp and unforgettable, the kind of smell that settles into your sinuses and refuses to leave. You can taste it, even if you didn't order the blood platter. You glance down at the arena floor, where a trail of it glistens in the sun like a poorly planned crime scene. A vulture circles above. Even the birds are in on it. But the Romans are nothing if not contradictory, so they try to balance this horror scent bouquet with perfume. At least half the crowd has doused themselves in oils, lavender, rose, myrrh, some other aroma that might just be wine. The effect is confusing. You're constantly caught in olfactory whiplash. One moment you're choking on grilled goat fumes, the next you're inside what smells like a mobile apothecary, staffed by a man who misunderstood the concept of subtlety. You look to your left. A woman is rubbing something floral onto her neck, with the intensity of someone trying to erase all evidence of being near other people. It's not working. The scent cloud surrounding her is dense enough to qualify as weather. There's smoke, too. It rises from the grills, yes. Grills where vendors cook sizzling meats just a few feet from where someone was mauled by a leopard 15 minutes ago. You catch the aroma of burnt pork, singed olives, and a slightly crispy sausage that may have fallen on the floor and been picked up with a shrug. The smoke drifts upward, mixing with incense from the earlier sacrificial rites. Now it's barbecue meets funeral, meets scented candle aisle. Your lungs are confused. You breathe deeply, mistake. You taste wine breath from the man 2 rows up, old cheese sweat from the man 2 rows down, and a whiff of wet wool from someone nearby whose cloak is still drying after a very aggressive rainstorm. Every breath is a gamble. Every exhale is a small prayer. And just when you think your nose can't take any more, someone near you opens a bag of dried squid. You don't know where they got it. You don't want to know. But it smells like Neptune himself wept into a leather pouch. You consider relocating your soul to another dimension. But the worst smell, the one that haunts you, is the fear. Because yes, fear has a smell. It's a sharp, acrid odor, like sour vinegar mixed with adrenaline and silent regrets. It oozes off the rookie gladiators. It clings to condemned criminals. It drips from the pores of anyone about to fight a bear with a pointy stick and a dream. There's one poor soul in the arena now, pacing nervously, covered in oil and terror. He's supposed to be playing Hercules in a reenactment. You can smell the panic from your seat. He's sweating lavender. It's not helping. And yet, somehow, amidst the blood, the body odor, the fish sauce, the flowers, the barbecue smoke, and the existential dread, it works. It's awful, yes, but it's also alive. The Colosseum doesn't just sound like chaos, it smells like it too. The scents layer on each other like a strange historical perfume, equal parts horror and humanity. It's messy, it's primal, it's unforgettable. And once it's in your tunic, good luck washing it out. Tickets to the Colosseum are technically free if you're a citizen, but seats are assigned by social rank. You're in the sun-blasted nosebleeds with the garlic merchants and the guy who won't stop burping. Let's start with the basics. The Colosseum, also known as the Flavian Amphitheatre, was Rome's big-budget blockbuster venue. A gift from the emperors to the people, a political flex dressed up as free entertainment. And by free they meant technically not charging you coins, but spiritually charging you everything else. Yes, admission is free if you're a Roman citizen. But as with everything in Roman life, the phrase, all are welcome, comes with about 37 asterisks, a footnote, and a subtle elbow to remind you you're not that important. When you arrive, you're greeted by a series of lines, checkpoints, and bored-looking ushers who vaguely resemble bouncers outside a nightclub, except the dress code here is more dusty tunic and questionable sandals than smart casual. You hold up your tessera, your small token that proves you're eligible to attend today's games. It's got your seat number scratched on it, and by seat, we mean a square of stone approximately 11 inches wide, directly beneath a man chewing loudly on fennel seeds. He seems to be vibrating with either excitement or indigestion, possibly both. Once inside, you're funneled through a series of vomitoria, no, not bathrooms. These are the cleverly named exit tunnels designed to vomit the crowd into their designated seating areas. The irony is not lost on you as you stumble into your assigned section and are immediately greeted by the smell of old wine, burnt garum, and someone's feet. The seating chart at the Colosseum reads like a social hierarchy carved into stone, because it is. At the very bottom, closest to the action, the splash zone if you will, are the senators and nobility. They get cushioned marble seats, shade, servants fanning them with palm leaves, and complimentary wine they pretend not to enjoy too much. One row up, the equestrian class, or Rome's middle upper tier rich folks. They get decent seats, decent shade, and the vague feeling of being close to power but not too close. Think of them as the ancient Roman version of economy plus. Next tier, regular male citizens, aka you and every other sweaty person who doesn't own land or have their name carved into anything. You're wedged shoulder to shoulder with butchers, bakers, and at least one guy who keeps yelling betting odds like he's running a back alley sportsbook. Above you, quite literally and figuratively, are the foreign diplomats, veterans, and city officials who got semi-privileged seating as a reward for either surviving a war or enduring the Senate. They get slightly wider seats, and maybe a better view of the tiger. At the very, very top nosebleed section, roof of the house, bring your own bird to snack on territory, are the women, slaves, and the urban poor. Sorry, Rome may give you bread and circuses, but it's not giving you a seat with a backrest. You're seated somewhere just below that in the sun-drenched middle-class purgatory zone. You can see the arena, sort of. You can hear most of the announcements, depending on how loudly the guy next to you is describing his foot infection. And if you squint, you can just make out the shimmer of a lion's mane before it mauls someone. Comfort is negotiable. There's no padding, no back support, and absolutely no personal space. You are physically closer to your seat neighbors than you've ever been to your own relatives. One man has fallen asleep on your shoulder. You let it happen. It's better than arguing. As for shade, that depends on the velarium, a giant canvas awning that's supposed to be extended by sailors trained to handle massive ropes and counterweights. In theory, it protects you from the Sunday. In practice, it covers maybe 12% of the seating and flaps in the wind like a toga with performance anxiety. Spoiler, you're not under it. You're in the solarium, baby the sun-soaked, seat-scorching, dehydration-inducing upper levels, where the only thing flowing more freely than sweat is second-hand gossip about which gladiator is dating, which fruit vendor. And yet, you're still here, with 50,000 others, packed in like oily sardines, because the Colosseum is where it happens. No matter your rank, if you can squeeze in, you can say you were part of it. You watched a criminal get flattened by a rhino. You saw a chariot crash into a stage prop shaped like a tree. You heard the emperor sneeze and 10,000 people bless him in unison. You might not be sitting next to a senator, but you are sitting next to a guy who claims he once sold garum to a senator's cousin's friend's goat, which, in Rome, is practically networking. So yes, technically, the Colosseum is free. But if you want a seat that doesn't slowly cook your butt like a panini, you'd better be born rich, die famous, or marry a guy with his name on a pillar. Until then, pass the fig cakes and adjust your tunic. The games are starting soon, and the garlic merchant to your left just bet 5 denarii that the next gladiator will trip on his own helmet. Frankly, you think he might be right. You slip the usher a coin. He slips you a side eye and pretends not to hear. Eventually, you get bumped up 2 rows after sharing your wine with a bored patrician's mistress. Because that's how it works in the Colosseum. Technically, yes, your seat is assigned. Technically, no, you're not supposed to move. But in practice, Roman society runs on coins, connections, and creatively concealed flattery. And if you're willing to play the game, you might just find yourself sitting closer to the action, or at least slightly less downwind of the guy selling hot squid. It begins the moment you shuffle in with the rest of the crowd, clutching your little clay tessera with the seat number scratched on like it was written by a sleepy goat. You look up, way up, toward your designated spot somewhere near the edge of the atmosphere and immediately start plotting. Because while your ticket says Section 28, your soul says, somewhere that doesn't require a Sherpa, your first mark is the usher. He's wearing a faded sash, holding a stick that may or may not be symbolic, and looking like the kind of man who has very strong opinions about olives. You sidle up casually, drop a small bronze coin into his palm, and give him the kind of half-smile that says, "I would like to commit minor social fraud now." He gives you the patented Roman bureaucratic shrug, a subtle shoulder twitch that means, "I saw that, I acknowledge that, I will now pretend I did not see that." He gestures vaguely toward the upper middle tiers and mutters something about an overcrowded section and blessed luck. Translation: try again, but with more effort. You wander back toward the stairwell, looking innocent and trying not to sweat too obviously. That's when you spot her, the patrician's mistress. You don't know her name, but her outfit is louder than a trumpet solo in a wine cellar. Bright silks, gold bracelets, and a look of chronic boredom that says she's 3 olives away from declaring war on mediocrity. She's seated alone, likely waiting for her wealthy companion to stop politicking with senators and bring her a snack. You hesitate, then make your move. You produce your secret weapon, a half jug of spiced wine. Not the good stuff, but heavily sugared, which is basically the same thing when you're 2 hours into blood sports and your mouth tastes like sand. She eyes the wine. You offer it wordlessly. She takes it. Minutes later, you're sitting 2 rows down from your original seat. The view is clearer. The air is slightly less rancid. And the mistress is now loudly critiquing the gladiators' haircuts with all the authority of someone who once dated a sculptor. Success. But it doesn't stop there. Because once you start climbing the social bleachers, even in tiny increments, it becomes addictive. You notice another usher nearby, younger, possibly less jaded, and definitely wearing eyeliner. You pass him a silver ring that your cousin swears belonged to a retired centurion. He accepts it wordlessly, then accidentally spills ink over the seating chart. Just like that, you're bumped 1 more row down and handed a cushion made of something that might once have been goose. The trick, of course, is to never be too obvious. The wrong move can get you kicked back to the outer rim, forced to sit on the stone floor with the pickpockets and the man selling mystery kebabs. You have to play it cool, compliment someone's sandals, offer your neighbor a plum, pretend you're friends with the cousin of a provincial governor. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to sound vaguely possible. A woman next to you nods approvingly. She's moved 3 rows already by pretending she's part of the Vestal Virgins reading group. You don't question it. She has an air of menace and a fan made of peacock feathers. But the real VIPs, the ones in the front rows with shade, servants, and the sort of smug posture that says, "My uncle owns an aqueduct," are untouchable, mostly. Unless you know a guy. And you do. Sort of. Your former neighbor, Tullius, now works in the kitchens beneath the arena feeding the beasts, prepping the snacks, trying not to get mauled by an elephant with an attitude problem. He owes you a favor after that time you returned his missing sandal and didn't ask questions. You send a runner with a message. Need a seat. We'll trade secrets for sausage. Half an hour later, you're ushered to a newly vacated cushion right behind a minor magistrate. Nobody asks where the previous occupant went. You don't ask either. You are now close enough to see the sweat on a gladiator's brow and count the teeth on the lion, 5, which seems low. You've reached the sweet spot, not so close that you risk getting splashed by arterial drama, but not so far that you need binoculars and divine intervention to see the action. You lean back. You sip the last of the wine. You nod politely to the mistress, who is now lecturing a senator about sandal design. You've done it. You, a garlic-smelling nobody with a sunburn and a knack for strategic generosity, have clawed your way halfway to respectability. 1 bribe, 1 plum, 1 flirtatious wine jug at a time. In Rome, this is what passes for social climbing. And honestly, it's almost worth the view. Nero's not here, but Domitian is lounging in the imperial box with enough cushions to sink a ship. Occasionally he gives a thumbs down. You're not sure if that's about the gladiator or the wine. From your spot in the sweaty, echoing tiers of the Colosseum somewhere between the garlic cellars and a goat that keeps trying to eat your sandal, you squint toward the imperial box. It's shaded, elevated, and so lavishly over-decorated, it looks like someone gave a toddler a palace budget and said, "Go nuts." There he is, Emperor Domitian, lounging in gold, threaded robes, surrounded by an entourage of whispering senators, polished guards, and at least 2 professional grape peelers. The imperial box has everything: shade, silence, safety. 3 things the rest of the arena very specifically lacks. It's the Roman equivalent of a corporate skybox, if that skybox also had absolute power and a personal execution squad. You watch as Domitian gestures lazily, like a man who's deeply offended by the concept of effort. His hand twitches downward, a half thumbs down, half wrist stretch that instantly makes the crowd roar. You lean over to your neighbor, a man chewing dried figs with the intensity of a battle-hardened general, and whisper, "Wait, does that mean death?" He shrugs. Sometimes. Or maybe he just hates the wine again. Because that's the thing. Nobody really knows what the thumbs down means. It's not an official signal. It might mean kill him. It might mean spare him. It might mean send in more flamingos. Only Domitian knows for sure, and he's not sharing. Let's talk about the luxury of the imperial box. While you're wiping blood-scented dust from your eyes and trying not to pass out from the sunstroke, Domitian is sipping wine that's been strained through linen, cooled in imported snow, and flavored with herbs probably grown on the moon. His seat is cushioned in purple-dyed fabrics, so expensive they were banned for anyone else. He has footstools. He has armrests. He has people fanning him with ostrich feathers, while he silently judges a man being gored by a rhinoceros. The contrast is staggering. You're chewing on mystery meat wrapped in a vine leaf that may or may not be sentient, while Domitian gets a midday banquet delivered on plates of gold. You're sweating through your 3rd tunic. He hasn't perspired since 81 AD, and yet, somehow, everyone keeps glancing up at him. Because the emperor isn't just a viewer, he's part of the show. Every flinch, every eyebrow twitch, every vaguely indifferent sip of wine is interpreted like an imperial edict. Did he smile? Maybe the gladiator lives. Did he frown? Could be the end for that lion tamer with poor posture. It's like being at a concert where the headliner is also judging the backup dancers and might feed someone to wolves on a whim. At one point, the games pause. A man in golden sandals steps forward, part announcer, part stage manager, part human stress toy, and reads aloud the emperor's schedule. You lean in. Following the elephant acrobats, he announces, His most sacred Imperium will bless the gladiators and bestow a garland upon the champion, assuming the champion has not yet been completely shredded. Everyone cheers. Even the goat bleats approvingly, because when the emperor blesses something, it becomes legend. A garland from Domitian is like getting a 5-star review from Jupiter himself. It means you might get your own mural. Or better, a retirement, with wine, and no more sword-based wake-up calls. But with power comes paranoia. That's why the Imperial Box is also the most heavily guarded space in the Colosseum. 10 Praetorian guards flank the emperor at all times, armed with spears, daggers, and the kind of permanent squint that says, I've never trusted joy. You try not to stare too long. Last time someone lingered on the emperor's sandal straps, they got mistaken for an assassin and thrown into the ring with an angry ostrich. The ostrich won. Still, you can't help but marvel. The architecture of the box is pure political theatre. Marble columns, polished bronze, and intricate carvings of gods who, frankly, look just as confused as you are. Even the shadows around the emperor seem better lit. It's a world away from the bleeding sand below, and yet Domitian doesn't look happy. Not really. He looks distracted. Maybe the Falcon show didn't meet expectations. Maybe his wine is room temperature. Maybe he's just realizing that everyone in the Colosseum is watching him just as closely as the action. Because when you're emperor, you're never off stage. And in a place like this with 50,000 sweaty citizens screaming for carnage, politics, and popcorn, even a poorly timed sneeze can spark rumors. So he sits, he judges, he sips. And somewhere between a dancing bear and a man trying to wrestle a giraffe with a rope made of figs, the emperor adjusts his cushion. And history continues. There are no bathrooms. Just a long walk and a communal sponge on a stick. By the time you get back, the guy next to you has stolen your seat and your date. Welcome to Roman Hygiene, Colosseum edition. You've been sitting here for hours now, knees stiff, sweat pooling in places you forgot had pores, and your bladder has launched a formal protest. You glance around. There's no handy exit ramp. No signs marked restroom this way. No queues of people checking their sundials while waiting for a private stall. No. There is only the journey. You wedge yourself out of your seat, offering a few mumbled apologies and a firm elbow to someone who seems determined to die before letting you pass. Eventually, you reach the narrow exit steps, dodge a child throwing a date pit like a dart, and begin the long descent through the bowels of the Colosseum. By the time you reach the designated latrine zone, your legs are jelly, your tunic is dust-colored, and you've developed an emotional attachment to the bottle of wine you left behind. The latrines, if you can call them that, are communal, carved stone benches with keyhole-shaped openings. They line the walls in a way that suggests privacy was never even a suggestion. You sit, elbow to elbow with strangers, everyone very aggressively pretending not to acknowledge each other's existence. No stalls, no doors, just deep eye contact with the wall. Now, let's talk about the sponge. Next to the bench sits a trough of vinegar water and a collection of communal sticks, each with a slightly sad-looking sponge attached to the end. These are the tersoriums, the Roman solution to toilet paper. The theory: dip the sponge, use the sponge, rinse the sponge, leave it for the next person. The reality: you will never feel truly clean again. You stare at the sponge stares back, you lose, and now comes the return journey. You trek back through the labyrinthine corridors, past vendors selling old olives and children reenacting the latest gladiator fight using chicken bones. You re-emerge into the blinding sun only to find your seat is gone. So is your date. In their place is a large man eating garum-flavored eggs and grinning at you with the confidence of a man who's absolutely not moving. You point at your spot. He shrugs. You try to reason. He belches. You turn to an usher, who is now mysteriously nowhere to be found. Welcome to the ancient Roman version of losing your towel at the beach only instead of sand. It's centuries-old stone bleachers. And instead of a towel, it's your entire social standing. With a resigned sigh, you shuffle 3 rows back and wedge yourself into half a seat between a man with 14 sons and a woman who keeps loudly explaining how this lion reminds her of her second husband. So, what happens if you can't make the trip in time? Well, people make do. That's why some spectators bring their own portable chamber pots. Others simply go with the flow. There are stories horrifying, hushed, and whispered through history of people wetting themselves mid-cheer and pretending it was spilled wine. It wasn't. It never is. Let's not forget the heat. A packed Colosseum in summer means gallons of sweat, flying droplets of grape juice, and occasional projectile vomit from a child who had too many honey cakes. If you're lucky, the air moves enough to dry you off. If you're unlucky, someone behind you mistakes your shoulder for a napkin. It's all part of the ambience. Now, if you're a noble, say, one of the elite watching from the lower tiers, you get access to private exits, private attendants, possibly even a real sponge. But for everyone else, you're at the mercy of the elements, your own organs, and the cruel game of whose seat is it anyway? There are no intermissions, no announcements, no breaks in the action. If you leave, you gamble. You might miss a decapitation. You might miss a chariot crash. You might return to find your seat held hostage by a 1-2-year-old with a bronze dagger and no respect for the elderly. And yet, somehow, you endure. Because as terrible as the facilities are, the entertainment keeps pulling you back. The roar of the crowd, the clash of weapons, the sudden appearance of a zebra. You wipe your hands on your tunic, glance down at your sponge-handled shame, and remind yourself, someday, people will build museums about this. You, on the other hand, just want your seat back. Then the velarium is pulled overhead, a massive canvas awning operated by sailors. You pray they don't drop it on your head. Again, because when you're one of 50,000 sunburnt Romans baking under the Mediterranean sun, the sudden appearance of storm clouds is both a blessing and a logistical nightmare. You may welcome the cool breeze, but the arena does not come with umbrellas, ponchos, or a functioning roof. What it does have is an enormous tarp and a handful of sailors with very questionable aim. Let's break it down. The velarium is an engineering marvel, and also somehow a threat to national safety. Picture a giant canvas parachute, the size of several football fields, rigged up around the rim of the Colosseum like the parachute, world's most poorly thought-out sun hat. It's meant to block the sun, deflect light showers, and occasionally collapse in a majestic, crowd-soaking fashion. And yes, it's operated by actual sailors from the Roman Navy, because apparently when you're not busy defending trade routes, you're hoisting ropes and avoiding eye contact with the senator whose wife just got dripped on. You look up. The sky has darkened. A few fat drops of rain splatter your knees. Around you, spectators gasp, groan, or cheer, depending on their level of hydration and how much they bet on the next lion not slipping. Then it begins. A flurry of movement along the Colosseum's upper edge. Dozens of men shirtless, sandal-wearing, yelling begin to tug on ropes, shouting commands in sailor speak that translates roughly to, "Pull harder, Lucius, or we all die." The velarium begins to unfurl. Slowly, painfully, like a lazy squid waking up from a nap. It billows. It flaps. It threatens to break free entirely and float into the sky like the world's largest reusable shopping bag. And then, it mostly works. You are, technically, covered. Sort of. There are gaps. Let's say, artistic spacing. The canvas has seen better decades. A few tears leak dramatically onto the crowd below. One section hangs so low it brushes the heads of the cheap-seat peasants, who scream in surprise and then immediately pretend they weren't scared. You glance to your left and see a man using a piece of stale bread as a rain shield. You glance to your right and notice the velarium is sagging dangerously low over the patrician section. One particularly plump senator is yelling at a sailor, who is yelling back with the sort of energy that suggests he's only here because he lost a dice game. Welcome to Roman weatherproofing. A system where, if it rains too hard, You just pretend it didn't. Let's say the storm really picks up. Thunder, wind, that thick, soggy type of rain that turns dust into foot-sucking mud. The Valerium begins to resemble a water balloon made of linen and bad decisions. Some sections have to be manually retracted. Others collapse dramatically. One unlucky usher is briefly catapulted 3 feet into the air by a snapping tension rope. You are, at this point, drenched. The air smells of wet wool, fermented body odor, and that strange note of citrus someone tried to use as deodorant. People are slipping downstairs. Vendors are screaming about limited edition wet figs. A child nearby is gleefully catching rain in his mouth, while his mother tries to keep her sandals from floating away. And the show? It goes on. Of course it does. Because Romans are nothing if not committed to a spectacle. Unless lightning strikes the emperor's favorite eagle statue, the games proceed. Gladiators now fight on mud-slicked ground. Lions skitter around like panicked kittens. And that poor man in charge of the elephants? He's having a full breakdown, mostly involving a broken umbrella and tears. Some of the more experienced crowd members brought their own weather gear. Cloaks, leather hoods. One guy with a literal turtle shell on his head, because he claims it's lucky and waterproof. Another woman is wearing an entire goose feather cloak that now smells like wet poultry and shame. You've got your tunic and a rapidly disintegrating fig leaf you found under your seat. Good luck. Now let's say miracle of miracles the rain stops. The Valerium must be furled back up. This takes about 20 minutes, 4 emergency sailors, and at least one man named Gaius screaming, left rope, while everyone pulls on the right. The canvas retracts like a cranky octopus returning to its lair. Bits of water dump onto the crowd in unexpected bursts. One particularly unlucky man ends up wearing the entire contents of a small rooftop puddle and is now known simply as Aquarius. And just like that, the sky clears. The sun returns. The Colosseum steams like a damp bathhouse. People shake out their togas, mop their brows, and begin arguing over whether the next match should include bears or just heavily armed flamingos. You look up at the sailors, who give you a cheerful thumbs up. You do not return it, because next time you're bringing your own tarp, your own rope, and maybe a small canoe just in case. No, Romans didn't have special rooms for vomiting up snacks. Vomitorium just means the exit. Though, after the third bear fight, you're reconsidering using it as a designated bath zone. Let's clear this up before we go any further. The word vomitorium has nothing to do with post-dinner purging. No one built architectural spaces for tactical yakking so they could immediately go back to snacking on olives and watching a man get eaten by a leopard. It's one of the most persistent myths about Roman life, the idea that gluttonous elites stuffed themselves silly, retreated to a designated vomit chamber, then emerged ready for round 2 of goose liver and honey-glazed dormice. Except that's nonsense. It's the historical equivalent of thinking the DMV has a champagne lounge. The word vomitorium comes from the Latin verb vomere, meaning to spew forth. Sounds gross, yes. But in Roman architectural terms, it simply referred to the exits in amphitheaters and stadiums, those passages through which the crowd spewed out at the end of a show. Think mass ejection of sweaty citizens, not mass evacuation of stomach contents. And yet, here you are, midway through an afternoon of sand, blood, and inexplicable interpretive dance by men wearing goat masks, staring longingly at the vomitorium, and wondering if anyone would notice if you just used it anyway, because you are not okay. Let's set the scene. The temperature has soared to crispy lamb shank. The man beside you is sweating so much you've named the puddle beneath him Lake Misery. You've been force-fed the visual equivalent of a horror movie marathon, and some genius just decided to follow a public execution with a light comedy involving a juggler and 3 mildly irritated peacocks. Your stomach? It's auditioning for a role in Pompeii, the musical. And here's the thing. Even though vomitoriums weren't used for vomiting, that doesn't mean you're not tempted. Because vomiting at a Roman spectacle? Entirely possible. Even likely. Between the overpowering smells of roasted animal, cheap perfume, stale wine, and lightly fermented goat breath, It's a miracle more people didn't just pass out with their face in someone's sandal. Add to that the visuals: severed limbs, wild beasts, and gladiators swinging swords like they're trying to win a meat raffle, and you've got the perfect recipe for spontaneous digestive regret. But there's no polite way to be sick in the Colosseum. There are no bath bags, no discreet bathroom stalls, no soothing music to help you through the waves of queasy horror. Just you, 50,000 Romans, and a very real fear of getting some on your tunic. Some Romans, of course, handle it like pros. A grizzled fishmonger 2 rows down is calmly eating grilled sardines while watching a reenactment of a naval battle involving actual drowning. A patrician woman nearby fans herself with an ivory comb while muttering that she's seen better entrails on a Tuesday. You're clutching your knees and making eye contact with the nearest exit like it might offer salvation. That's your vomitorium. A blessedly dark corridor leading out of this madness and into the slightly less chaotic streets of Rome. You shuffle toward it, slowly, trying to blend in, as if you're just stretching your legs. No big deal. Just casually walking away from the guy dressed as Mars who's now juggling flaming hammers. Unfortunately, the vomitorium is crowded. People are coming and going. Some are sneaking out to relieve themselves behind the latrine cart. Others are slipping out for a quick nap. One man appears to be loitering there just to sell bootleg falafel. You wedge yourself between 2 elderly senators who smell like philosophy and regret. One of them is discussing tax reforms. The other is asleep, possibly dead. And still, no barfing. Because despite the urge, despite the myth, despite everything, you realize that vomiting here would be the most embarrassing thing to happen to you today. Which is saying something, because earlier a mime accidentally sat on your lap and called it an act of Dionysian performance. So you hold it in, breathe deeply, count backwards from 10, and try not to focus on the guy in the arena whose intestines just made a surprise cameo. Eventually the feeling passes. The nausea retreats like a disappointed gladiator. You straighten your tunic, wipe your brow, walk back to your seat with all the grace of a defeated warhorse and pretend nothing ever happened. Back in your seat, you casually mention the myth to your neighbor. Did you know, you say, trying to sound breezy, vomitorium doesn't mean what people think it means. He stares at you, then burps loudly, then goes back to eating what may or may not be a pigeon on a stick. You vow never to speak again, but at least now you know. The Romans didn't puke in special rooms. They just did it the old-fashioned way, over the edge of the railing, into their sandals, or most likely into their souls. And somehow, that's worse. Couples flirt in the stands. Gladiators flirt with death. Somewhere, someone proposes with a chicken bone. Romance is complicated. Let's be honest. Nothing says eternal devotion like holding hands while watching someone get decapitated in high-definition sand. The Colosseum may be a blood-soaked theatre of death, but it's also one of Rome's most bustling dating arenas. If you've ever wondered what it's like to flirt while surrounded by lions, corpses, and airborne poultry bones, well, welcome to date night, Roman style. You're squeezed next to your beloved, sharing a seat meant for half a butt cheek, shielding your eyes from the sun with the same linen rag you both use to mop sweat and tears. There's no privacy, no soft music, no waiter bringing you wine. The only ambience is the sound of a screaming crowd and the faint gurgle of someone dying dramatically in the pit below. Still, the chemistry is real. To your left, a couple has clearly been whispering sweet nothings for an hour, or possibly debating who brought the better sausage. To your right, a young man is attempting to impress his date by identifying each gladiator by name and weapon preference, like an ancient Roman fantasy football nerd. She looks mildly horrified, or deeply in love. Could go either way. You, of course, are trying to hold it together while passing your shared snack, some wine-soaked bread, and a questionable fig back and forth like a romantic ritual of gastrointestinal roulette. But love thrives here, oddly enough. The adrenaline, the tension, the sheer absurdity of mortality being served as mass entertainment, it bonds people. It's like speed dating meets a war crime. And don't even get started on the gladiators themselves. Because if you think modern celebrities have groupies, imagine being a gladiator shirtless, scarred, oiled up like a roasted duck, and somehow both a condemned criminal and the star of the show. These men, and occasionally women, gladiatrices, are hot commodities, literally and figuratively. They have fans, they have merchandise, they have love poems scratched into marble walls by admirers who may or may not be literate but are definitely thirsty. One popular gladiator, Crescens the net thrower, had no fewer than 8 fan letters preserved in graffiti. One reads, "Crescens, the heartthrob of the girls." Another just says, "He made me drop my date cake." And then there's the story of gladiators receiving gifts, locks of hair, garlands, entire roast chickens flung at them from the stands by swooning fans. If a gladiator winked at you, that was it. You were emotionally ruined for life. Good luck explaining that to your husband over dinner. Marriage proposals? Absolutely a thing. The Colosseum was a place of intense emotion, and intense emotion does weird things to people. Somewhere in the sticky chaos of gladiator fights and exotic animal hunts, someone always decided that now was the perfect moment to pop the question. No ring? No problem. Just use whatever's handy. A bronze coin, a flower garland, a chicken bone cleaned off during intermission. Nothing says, "Spend your life with me," like the femur of a roasted hen, still faintly greasy. But for gladiators themselves, love was tricky. Most of them were slaves or criminals. Some were technically married before being condemned to the arena, but the odds of seeing your spouse again? Let's just say, slim. Love, for them, was often transactional, fleeting, or tragic. That said, some gladiators managed to win the hearts of wealthy patrons and occasionally even marry into high society. Yes, there were rare, juicy scandals where a noblewoman would fall in love with a gladiator, spark an enormous social uproar, and either elevate him to minor celebrity status or have him discreetly poisoned. Romance was dicey in Rome. Back in the stands, you're still working on keeping the romance alive between bouts of public disembowelment. Your date is clapping politely at the latest execution, and you're wondering whether now is a good time to mention how cute they look in this light. You know, aside from the blood spatters and the slight smell of goat fat. You lean in. They lean in. Someone in front of you stands up, and you both get a full view of a dismembered torso flying through the air like a warning from Cupid's darker twin. You pretend you didn't see it. They pretend they're not crying. You both agree that this is still more romantic than your last trip to the Forum baths. As the afternoon wears on, couples peel away. Some leave hand in hand, giddy with adrenaline. Some part ways in awkward silence, realizing they may not share the same opinions on acceptable levels of carnage. Others remain, cuddling beneath shared cloaks as the sun sets behind the arena's arches, surrounded by ghosts of love, war, and probably someone's misplaced falafel. So yes, love in the time of gladiators was weird. It was dramatic. It was sweaty. It was loud, inconvenient, and occasionally involved wild animals. But it happened. It bloomed. It survived, even in the shadow of death. Because if humans are good at one thing aside from inventing increasingly creative ways to hurt each other, it's falling in love in absolutely terrible places. And the Colosseum? That was just Rome's favorite dating app, with more swords and significantly worse hygiene. For special events, engineers flooded the Colosseum for fake naval battles. Which is fun until you realize they're fighting with real weapons and you're getting splashed with real body parts. Let's start with the obvious. Flooding an arena the size of a small town is not normal behavior. But the Romans were not interested in normal. They were interested in spectacle, preferably involving violence, hydraulics, and a mild disregard for physics. Enter the Naumachia. Yes, they actually called it that. A Naumachia. A word that sounds like a sea creature, but actually means a full-on mock naval battle, staged right in the middle of the Colosseum. Forget halftime shows. This was halftime shipwrecks. It begins with a dry, dusty arena floor, the same one that just hosted a bear-on-bear cage match or a gladiator grudge match over borrowed sandals. Overnight, Roman engineers, probably sleep-deprived, overworked, and whispering ancient Latin curses, would open a series of underground channels connected to the city's aqueducts. And then, whoosh, Water flooded in, quickly transforming the sandy battleground into a shallow inland sea. Not exactly the Mediterranean, but good enough to float a small boat. Or several. You're now watching the Colosseum attempt to cosplay as the Adriatic. You're sitting in the stands, watching the water level rise. The crowd is buzzing with anticipation. The lady next to you is trying to balance a jug of wine on her knees while tying her hair up, nautical style. Whatever that means. Meanwhile, you're nervously wondering if the waterproofing on your sandals is rated for blood water. Once the arena is filled to battle depth not too deep, or people might drown in dramatic ways that ruin the vibe, out come the ships. Not toy boats, not carved props. Actual recreated warships, complete with rowers, sails, and confused prisoners dressed as ancient pirates or barbarian navies. These people are not actors. They are mostly condemned criminals. And they are absolutely fighting for their lives. The crowd roars as two sides paddle toward each other, shouting lines from whatever war epics they were told to memorize. You suspect some of them are improvising. Others are vomiting over the side. One guy is using his oar as a paddleboard because no one told him how boats work. The battles are chaotic. There are rams, there are archers. There are flaming projectiles, not ideal when you're floating on a wooden ship in the middle of a giant wooden amphitheater. Occasionally a man screams, "Aquila!" and then gets hit in the head with a javelin. Historically accurate? Questionable. Entertaining? Yes. And let's not forget the sound design. The creak of ships, the clash of iron, the screams, the slosh of water that smells faintly of wet limestone and regret. All of this echoing under a hot Roman sun while someone in the back row is trying to hawk pickled goat tongues as a mid-battle snack. But wait, you're not just watching this. You're experiencing it. Because, dear sleeper, the splash zone is real. Every time a ship capsizes, and at least one always does, the water surges, and now your knees are wet, and so is your date, and your fig-stuffed pastry just floated 2 rows down. You're soaked. You're sticky, and you've just made awkward eye contact with a floating corpse. This is fine. Also, did we mention the cleanup? After the battle ends either with one side clearly victorious, or both sides mysteriously sinking at the same time, the Romans drain the arena. All of it. Within hours. The engineers flip a few valves, open the drains, and just like that, the water disappears down into a series of underground canals. Of course, the real question is, where did all that water plus the blood, sweat, and miscellaneous body parts go? Answer: probably into a section of Rome's sewer system that historians politely refer to as not ideal. Then comes the most mind-boggling part. They do this again, sometimes multiple days in a row. Depending on how long the festival runs and how enthusiastic the emperor is feeling, you could watch an entire mini-fleet rise and fall in the Colosseum every afternoon. It's like ancient Shark Week, but with more war crimes. Let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer audacity of this. The Romans looked at their biggest, most important entertainment venue, a marvel of architecture, engineering, and blood-soaked pageantry, and said, "Yes, this is nice. But what if we filled it with water and made criminals fight like they were in Waterworld? Except even messier." And then they did it, regularly, with funding. It was logistical madness. It was morally questionable. It was probably a public health nightmare. But it worked. For a little while anyway. Later renovations to the Colosseum made these battles less practical, and eventually they stopped altogether. Something about the emperor getting splashed in the face and demanding no more puddles in my wine. But for a few glorious years, Rome had its own indoor naval combat zone. And if that doesn't make your modern entertainment options look underwhelming, I don't know what will. So the next time you complain about buffering during a Netflix show, remember, 2,000 years ago, people sat under a scorching sun for 8 hours straight, watching men drown each other in a man-made lake, while trying not to spill their fermented fish sauce. And you thought your Tuesday was weird. You can buy miniature gladiator helmets, Lucky Charms, or a freshly plucked lion tooth if you're into that sort of thing. You go home with a stubbed toe and a tunic stain shaped like Africa. Let's talk souvenirs. Because what's the point of spending an entire day watching people get mauled by bears and stabbed with tridents if you don't come home with a commemorative knick-knack? Just outside the Colosseum's arches, and occasionally inside, if the vendors were bold or bribed enough, a bustling trade of arena merchandise thrives. Stalls groan under the weight of hand-carved figurines, thumb-sized amphorae filled with authentic Colosseum sand, likely scooped from a ditch in Trastevere, and clay medallions shaped like the faces of your favorite gladiators. You know, like a bloodier version of Roman Pokemon cards. There are also terracotta busts of top gladiators, complete with dramatically inaccurate muscles and chiseled expressions of eternal suffering. The bigger the fan base, the more creative the merch. Gladiators with cult followings have their own slogans scrawled on pottery shards. One particularly popular fighter, Milo the Moorslayer, has a line of tunics printed with his battle pose. You see a child wearing one. The child is also holding a sausage twice his own length. Both are impressive. And of course, the very dedicated fans might splurge on the more intense memorabilia, like a lion tooth from the morning's beast fight, still warm. That'll cost you. It's got to be pried from the animal's gory remains before the cleanup crew hauls it away, and technically that makes it illegal extraction of imperial property. But who's checking? You peer into one vendor's crate and spot tiny replica helmets in bronze and pewter, each shaped like the distinctive headgear of different gladiator types: Murmelo, Thrakes, Retiarius. They're adorable and completely impractical. You buy one. It immediately pokes through your satchel and stabs you in the thigh. Welcome to the price of fandom. Some enterprising vendors even sell good luck charms, claiming they were blessed by a temple priest or touched by a victorious gladiator's sandal. You suspect most of them were touched by a very sweaty merchant. Still, people buy them in droves, hoping the little amulets might bring courage, protection, or better seating. You overhear a man bartering for a piece of splintered wood that he swears is from a gladiator's broken shield. The seller promises it belonged to a man who died bravely while shouting an insult at the emperor. The buyer is moved to tears. The wood, you later learn, is from a fish crate. And then there's the food-themed merch. Yes, this is a thing. Vendors hawk pastries shaped like lions, cookies iced to resemble amphitheaters, and for some reason fig-stuffed buns sold as victory loaves. The buns are chewy, sweet, and shaped like little fists. You buy two. One for eating, one for passive-aggressively flinging at your least favorite senator. You continue your stroll and notice a sandal shop offering the same style worn by the brave men of the arena. They look exactly like your own sandals, but twice the price, and with a dramatic name: Souls of Valor. You decline. Of course, not all merchandise is tangible. Some hawkers sell scrolls of popular arena gossip, hand-copied snippets of recent fights, dramatic deaths, and scandalous backstage drama. Think of it as ancient sports journalism mixed with reality TV recaps, written in messy Latin and often exaggerated beyond belief. One scroll claims that a certain gladiator slew a tiger while blindfolded and seduced a senator's wife in the same afternoon. You buy it anyway. The entertainment value alone is worth it. And let's not forget the scent peddlers, traveling sellers offering amphorae of arena air bottled before the opening slaughter. They wave the jars dramatically under people's noses. You take a sniff. It smells like sweat, iron, and marketing desperation. Now, if you're particularly unlucky, or just indecisive, you might leave without buying anything, only to get caught in the exit stampede, stub your toe on a runaway wine jug, and fall into someone's lap. That someone happens to be an aristocrat with a deeply punchable nose. He sneers. You apologize. He still threatens to sue you via wax tablet. You limp home, bleeding slightly, holding your dented replica helmet and clutching a souvenir tunic smeared with a mystery sauce that definitely wasn't yours. But it was all worth it, because that stain sort of looks like the shape of Africa, and someone will believe you when you say it's an authentic splatter from a gladiator's final blow. Sure, you didn't get a lion tooth, or a victory loaf that didn't immediately fall on the ground, but you got something better. A weird story, a bruised shin, and a tunic that now doubles as a conversation piece. So, next time you visit the arena, Bring a little extra coin, a lot of skepticism, and maybe a bag large enough to carry a souvenir without impaling yourself. Just don't forget where you bought it, or you'll end up bragging about your lion tooth, only to realize it's a pig molar dipped in vinegar. Still counts. Scrawled on the walls are little messages. Spiculous was hot. Best. Lion fight ever. And avoid the sausages. You add your own. Send help. Still can't feel my legs. You might think graffiti is a modern invention, a symptom of subway ennui or teenage rebellion. But the Romans? They were writing on walls centuries before it was edgy. And where better to scribble your unsolicited opinions than the stone bones of the Colosseum, the empire's most blood-soaked, noise-choked, sweat-slicked megastadium? Take a stroll through the shadowy corridors under the seats, and you'll see it, scratched into plaster, etched into stone, smeared in charcoal or wax, not dignified inscriptions or lofty prose. No, these are the equivalent of bathroom stall poetry and Twitter rants, ancient style. One message reads, "Spiculous was hot." No explanation, no context. Just raw thirst for a gladiator whose name echoed through the crowd like a pop star's. It's hard not to picture some lovesick teenager, or senator's wife, surreptitiously carving that into the stone with a hairpin while sighing dramatically. Another review boasts, "Best lion fight ever 10/10ths, would watch again." There are no stars, no rating systems. Just raw, visceral commentary from someone clearly thrilled by a particularly graphic mauling. You shudder. Not because of the violence you've seen worse today, but because the handwriting is terrible. Then there's the ominous. Avoid the sausages. Whether this is culinary advice, a personal vendetta, or a bizarre metaphor remains unclear. Either way, you clutch your stomach and whisper a quiet prayer. The graffiti isn't limited to short quips either. Some messages ramble on lengthy rants about poor seating, shady vendors, or the emperor's questionable fashion choices. One rather elegant script says, "I paid 3 denarii for shade and got none. Curse whoever invented the Sunday." You nod in solemn agreement. The Colosseum was, after all, a hub of raw human emotion, passion, anger, triumph, hunger. And when the crowd needed to vent, and paper was expensive, they went straight to the walls. But this wasn't limited to the Colosseum alone. Rome itself was a graffiti-covered playground. From tavern walls to brothel doorways to the sides of bathhouses, Romans had no shame when it came to immortalizing their thoughts. Whether it was a political insult or a very bad love poem, if there was a surface, someone probably defiled it with an opinion. Back in the arena, you take a moment to leave your own mark. Nothing poetic, no tribute to a fallen warrior, just a simple, honest truth. Send help. Still can't feel my legs. You etch it into the stone behind your bench with a coin. It's not elegant, but it's legible. You sit back, satisfied. Someday, maybe some future historian will discover your message and theorize that it was a metaphor for spiritual despair. In reality, your calves just haven't worked properly since the chariot crash intermission. Next to your masterpiece, someone else has added, "Livia plus Decimus equals 4 ever." The lettering is large and clumsy. A heart is drawn beneath it. It's sweet. Then someone else has scratched a response. "Decimus is mine, cow." Ah, ancient romance. Further along, you see something more cryptic. The gods favor the bold, but not the drunk. You're not sure if it's philosophical or a stern warning. Either way, you mentally note not to accept any more wine from the garlic merchant 2 rows down. Of course, not all the messages were fun. Some were clearly warnings or threats. "He who cheats at dice will lose more than coin." Or, "The emperor sees all, especially you, Gaius." Gaius, whoever he was, probably didn't sleep well after that. One section is filled entirely with stick figures, gladiators with oversized swords, lions that look more like disgruntled cats, a crude sketch of what might be a naval battle, or a man aggressively stirring soup. It's like a child's sketchbook had a nervous breakdown. You love it. There's also poetry. Yes, very bad poetry. One reads, "O Valeria, Your eyes like olives, your breath like garum, strong and brave. When you look at me, I tremble, like a goat about to misbehave. You don't know whether to laugh or file a restraining order. Either way, you whisper thank you to the anonymous poet and move along. Some messages are scratched so deep into the stone they must have taken hours. That's commitment. Others are just fleeting chalk marks, already half erased by time or boot heels. A few have been overwritten ancient flame wars, literally carved into history. And every once in a while, you stumble across a message that feels eerily familiar. Like this one. Too loud, too crowded, too many elbows, would not recommend. You stare at it, you nod, you feel seen. And so, in the grand tradition of Roman graffiti artists, you leave one more message, your review of the day, carved for eternity. Came for the lions, stayed for the drama, leaving with a limp. Future archaeologists will puzzle over it. Scholars will debate whether it was metaphorical. A few will write papers. But only you and the 50,000 other sweaty, shouty Romans around you will truly understand. At night, the arena goes quiet except for the janitors sweeping up limbs and leftover beans. You're still trying to find your sandal. Someone stole it during the lion fight intermission. The sun has dipped below the Roman skyline, casting long shadows across the blood-stained sand. The crowd is gone mostly. A few stragglers remain, hunched over lost belongings or whispering sweet nothings to unconscious boyfriends. The Colosseum, which just hours ago shook with the roars of beasts and the cheers of citizens, now hums with a very different kind of energy. Clean up. It begins almost immediately after the final act, be it a duel, a chariot crash, or an awkward poetry recital by a tipsy senator. Dozens of workers emerge from hidden tunnels, sweeping, dragging, shoveling, and sighing deeply. You spot one poor soul trying to remove what appears to be a large, flattened fig from the imperial steps. It's not going well. Some janitors wear sandals, others go barefoot, which is frankly brave, considering the amount of mystery fluids on the floor. A few are armed not for defense, but to poke sleeping spectators who refuse to leave. You see a guy in the upper tier being gently jabbed with a mop handle. He mutters something about spiculous and resumes snoring. The arena itself, once the stage for epic battles and questionable dance numbers, looks less like a majestic venue and more like a particularly violent farmer's market exploded. There are crushed olives, half-eaten loaves, and what might be a goat hoof jammed in the floorboards. You spot a broken trident lodged in a pillar. Casual. And the smell? Oh, the smell evolves after sunset. Where once you had the complex bouquet of sweat, wine, smoke, and hubris, now you get the ripe after-party stench of damp cloaks, warm beans, and regret. Someone somewhere is still burning incense, but it's fighting a losing battle. You wander back to your bench to collect your things, only to discover someone has stolen your date, your cushion, and one of your sandals. All that remains is a sticky cup of something that might have once been wine. You sip it. You regret everything. By now, the torchbearers are making their rounds, lighting the sconces along the corridors. The flickering flames give the empty Colosseum an almost holy glow, like a cathedral built by people who really, really liked stabbing. You hear the soft clink of armor being stacked and folded. Somewhere, a lion is snoring, and yet, it's peaceful. There's a strange intimacy to the place when the crowds are gone. You can hear the wind whispering through the upper arches. The stones feel softer somehow, less like monuments to brutality, and more like ancient bones settling in for a nap. You pass a small group of gladiators leaving through a side gate. One limps, one hums, one carries what looks like a sack of grapes. They nod to you in that way all service workers do when their shift ends and yours hasn't. You nod back. Brothers in survival. Deeper in the belly of the Colosseum, the real night shift begins. Animal handlers coax nervous beasts back into cages. A rhino, still irritated from earlier, stomps angrily at a wall. A pack of dogs feasts on leftover bread and whatever unidentifiable meat got thrown their way. A worker mutters, "Not again," and throws a bucket of water at a smouldering bench. A few vendors remain, counting coins under sputtering torches, One offers you a lukewarm meat stick. You ask what animal it came from. He simply says, yes. You decline. The wealthy have long since departed, whisked away by litter or sedan chair to their perfumed homes, where they'll retell stories of heroism and horror over stuffed dormice and fig cakes. But here in the stone ribs of the arena, only the real people remain: the cleaners, the wranglers, the staff, and you, a sandalless spectator with mild hearing loss and a tunic that now smells vaguely of camel. You eventually find your sandal near the eastern arch. It's damp, and someone's drawn a tiny gladiator on the sole, but it's yours. You slip it on with relief. Small victories. As you make your way toward the exit, you pass the vomitoria, those grand passageways built not for purging snacks, sorry, myth fans, but for efficient crowd dispersal. Now they're nearly empty, echoing with the occasional cough, belch, or overly loud farewell. You take one last look at the arena floor. It's calmer now, no screaming, no drums. Just a few workers rolling up the last of the sand like it's a particularly violent carpet. The moonlight touches the top tier. A breeze moves through the skeleton of the stadium. And for a moment, just a moment, it's beautiful. Not in the wedding at sunset way. More in the wow, humans really built this thing to murder each other for fun kind of way. You leave your final footprint in the dust, possibly on someone's leftover lentils, and step into the cool Roman night. The city hums in the distance. Somewhere, a tavern calls your name. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow you'll return for another round of chaos. Blood, love, lions, beans, and sandal theft. But not tonight. Tonight you limp home. And you sleep like a particularly exhausted barbarian. You're in the upper tier, exposed to the elements, too far to see the action, but just close enough to hear someone scream, "I lost a bet," and immediately get eaten. Ah yes, welcome to the top of the Roman social ladder, if the ladder were upside down and covered in bird droppings. This is the Summa Cavia, the section reserved for the lowest-ranking citizens. Merchants, peasants, freedmen, extremely sweaty tourists, and that one guy who keeps shouting, "Bring back the giraffes." You didn't so much get a seat as you got a general suggestion of a place to stand and not die. From this high up, the Colosseum's bloody pageantry is reduced to a charming series of dots and gasps. Gladiators become ants with anxiety. Tigers look like mildly perturbed cats. And when someone gets decapitated, you only know because half the crowd suddenly stands and yells, "Ooh!" You squint toward the center. Is that Spiculus the crowd is cheering for? Or just another guy in a shiny helmet? Hard to tell. The sun's in your eyes. Also, your neighbor's hat is enormous and covered in feathers that keep tickling your ear. Still, you're grateful for the breeze. Down in the lower seats, the ones filled with senators and togaed influencers, it's a stew of perfume, ambition, and light murder. Up here, the air smells like roasted nuts, wet marble, and poor life choices. You lean forward to get a better look, nearly toppling into the lap of a fishmonger, eating something that might be eel or might be shoe leather. He grunts. You apologize. He offers you a bite. You decline with polite horror. Your bench, if you can even call it that, is a narrow slice of stone warmed by centuries of butts. There is no cushion. There is no backrest. There is a large crack in the floor just wide enough to trap your sandal if you wiggle too much. You try not to think about it. Occasionally, a vendor stumbles up this high, wheezing and swearing under his breath. He offers burnt chickpeas and watered-down wine from a suspiciously leaky jug. You trade a coin and a half-hearted compliment. He throws in a bonus fig. It is both squishy and judgmental. Suddenly, the crowd erupts. You missed it. Something happened. Someone got gored, executed, proposed to. All you know is everyone below is screaming while your section debates whether it was a bear, a buffalo, or maybe just a particularly angry senator. A woman beside you claims she saw a unicorn. You nod and sip your wine thing. There's a definite camaraderie up here, forged in sunstroke and shared disappointment. Someone starts a chant. You join in despite not knowing the words. Another person begins sketching the arena with charcoal on the back of a bread wrapper. It's terrible, but you pretend it's good. Then, a strong gust of wind threatens to blow off your tunic. You clutch your dignity and scoot closer to the wall, which, while crumbling, at least offers shade and a faint sense of historical support. Below, the Emperor gestures dramatically. The crowd reacts. You hear someone yell, "Thumbs down," while someone else argues it was sideways. From your vantage point, all imperial gestures look the same: distant, imperious, and heavily moisturized. It begins to drizzle. Just a whisper of rain, but enough to make the already treacherous stone slicker than an eel dipped in olive oil. People start muttering. Someone falls. The fishmonger laughs. His eel shoe remains intact. As rain picks up, those in the lower levels are quickly covered by the velarium, the massive awning pulled across by trained sailors. Up here, not so much. You're soaked. Your neighbor is soaked. The wine jug is now officially waterlogged. Your fig has floated away, but no one leaves. Because to leave is to risk losing your spot. To descend those stairs means battling an avalanche of sandals, elbows, and passive-aggressive grunting. Also, you'd miss the finale, the grand finale involving 2 elephants, a juggler, and a man named Cassius the Unremarkable. So you stay. You huddle. You share a soggy meat pie with a stranger. You cheer when someone finally falls off a chariot. You boo when the lion refuses to participate. And for one ridiculous, glorious moment, it doesn't matter that you're wet, cold, and deeply unsure whether the thing on your leg is mud or something worse. Because here you are in the world's most famous death stadium, watching history unfold one squint and shriek at a time. You may not be able to see much, but you feel it. The tension, the spectacle, the absurdity of it all. And when someone again yells, "I lost a bet," and a second later a lion lunges into view, you nod solemnly. It's not a front row experience, but it's yours. And hey, at least the nosebleeds come with character. And the best chance of surviving a surprise rhinoceros stampede. Beneath the arena is a maze of cages, trapdoors, and panic. Animals, prisoners, and very confused stagehands all live in a chaos dungeon you do not want to get stuck in. And yet, somehow, here you are standing in the underbelly of the Colosseum, surrounded by squeaking pulleys, flickering torches, and the distinct smell of wet fur and forgotten ambition. They call it the Hypogeum, which is Latin for, "Please don't scream, you'll startle the ostriches." This subterranean labyrinth is the engine room of Rome's greatest spectacle. It's not on the postcards, but it's the reason lions appear out of nowhere, prisoners vanish into trapdoors, and the crowd keeps gasping with synchronized confusion. There are 2 levels. Both are dimly lit, vaguely damp, and echo with a symphony of snorts, whimpers, and the occasional "oops" from a panicked slave trying to reset the hydraulic winch system. Yes, hydraulics. Welcome to the 1st century version of stagecraft, powered by manpower, rope tension, and pure theatrical chaos. You pass a holding pen. Inside is a bear, or at least something large, shaggy, and morally offended. It snorts at you like it knows you've never read Seneca. A nearby handler tosses it a chunk of meat the size of your torso and moves on to check the next cell, a cage containing either a tiger or the world's angriest striped carpet. The tunnels were once above ground. Then Emperor Domitian decided the Colosseum needed more surprises. So he built this underground wonder of engineering and existential dread. Over 30 elevators were installed, manually operated by teams of sweaty workers who probably hadn't blinked in 3 days. These wooden platforms could lift gladiators, animals, trees, even miniature temples into the arena above. 1 minute, the sand is empty. The next, a giraffe appears, confused and slightly seasick. The crowd goes wild. You, meanwhile, are clinging to a wall, trying not to get trampled by a goat in armor. Every few feet, a trapdoor mechanism creaks ominously. You're told not to stand on them, which is difficult because they're everywhere. Some open silently, some with a crash, and all of them seem designed specifically to kill anyone not paying attention. A stagehand pushes past you, muttering something about a crocodile that escaped last week and is probably fine by now. You come to a corridor, stacked with props, broken weapons, shattered shields, ceremonial headdresses, and one severed mannequin arm covered in glitter. A bored-looking man is repainting a helmet. Another is duct-taping a spear. You ask him how the duct tape works without duct. He stares at you. You back away slowly. Further in, you find the animal wranglers. These brave or very foolish souls are tasked with getting rhinos, leopards, and elephants into position without dying in the process. One is nursing a bite on his arm. Another has fashioned what can only be described as a lion whispering stick. No one looks relaxed. A pair of engineers are checking pulleys, arguing over whether they need more counterweights or just fewer elephants. You nod thoughtfully, as if you too are fluent in ancient pulley logistics. Secretly, you're just hoping there are no sudden loud noises, because the hyena in the corner has not broken eye contact with you for 10 minutes. There's also the prisoner corridor, a low-ceilinged hall, lined with iron-barred cells. Some occupants are pacing, others are praying. One is humming what you think might be a pop ballad if pop ballads had been invented yet. These are the condemned. Tomorrow they will be executed between the bear fight and the mime who juggles skulls. As you stumble toward the central shaft, you hear the sound of gears turning. A platform is rising. You catch a glimpse of sunlight filtering down through the wooden slats above. A gladiator stands on the platform, sword at the ready, looking heroic and mildly bored. The gate closes behind him. The platform lifts. He disappears into the light. Moments later, cheers, then screams, then more cheering. Back down here, it's just dust and echoes. You feel the tremor of footfalls, probably the elephants rehearsing for tomorrow's aquatic ballet. Did we mention they sometimes flood the arena? Because they do. And the drainage system runs right through here. You hope your sandals are waterproof. They aren't. You ask someone how often things go wrong. He just laughs. In a way, this is Rome at its most Roman. Elaborate, theatrical, brilliant, and utterly chaotic. The Hypogeum is a machine not of war, but of wonder. It turns men into myths, lions into symbols, wooden elevators into instruments of suspense. Eventually you climb a ladder and emerge, squinting, into the blinding daylight of the Colosseum floor. The roar of the crowd hits you like a wave. They have no idea what just happened beneath them. They don't see the sweat, the fear, the choreography. They see magic. You wipe something unidentifiable off your tunic, glance one last time at the trapdoor that almost swallowed your left foot, and say a quiet prayer to the gods of stage management. Because down in the tunnels, the real drama lives. And it is always, always late for rehearsal. You owe a debt. You made a bad bet. Now you're wearing sandals made of hope and regret, and your training sword looks suspiciously like a broom handle. Good luck. You didn't plan on this, of course. Nobody plans to become a gladiator. One day you're placing a friendly wager on which lion will eat the accountant first, and the next you're the accountant shirtless, sunburnt, and enrolled in Rome's least desirable internship program. Welcome to the Ludus, the gladiator training school. Think of it as a cross between a gym, a prison, and a motivational death cult. The air smells of sweat, iron, and despair. The walls echo with the sound of wooden swords clacking and grown men whimpering. You clutch your broom handle weapon and try not to faint. Your new life begins with the intake process, which feels less like joining a sports team and more like being auctioned as a human piñata. A grizzled trainer, the lanista, sizes you up. He pokes your arms, checks your teeth, and mutters something about your potential bone density. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a warning. Then he slaps you on the back and says, "Congratulations, you're a secutor." You have no idea what that means, but everyone around you looks mildly amused. Later, you'll learn it means the chaser, a gladiator who fights heavily armored and slowly overheats in the sun like an overconfident rotisserie chicken. You're handed your gear. A helmet that smells like its last owner didn't survive long enough to clean it. A shield made of wood that looks like it would lose a fight with a breeze. And a training sword, wooden, yes, but surprisingly good at reminding you what pain feels like. Training begins at dawn. Always dawn. You wake to the sound of a horn, stumble into the yard, and immediately regret every decision that led you here. The drill masters bark commands. Footwork, they shout. Discipline, they shout louder. Stop crying, they shout at you specifically. You learn to fight, sort of. You also learn to fall, roll, bleed, and swear in Latin. You discover that sand gets absolutely everywhere. You meet other trainees, some criminals, some debtors like you, and one guy who claims he joined voluntarily because it's good cardio. You also learn about the diet. Forget fine Roman dining, this is gladiator grub. Barley mash, beans, a splash of vinegar for flavor if the gods are feeling generous. It's meant to build bulk, not taste good. You chew slowly, wondering if your jaw will ever forgive you. The lanista walks among you, observing. Occasionally he stops a sparring match, corrects someone's stance, or casually tells a trainee, "You'll die first." He says it so often it almost sounds like encouragement. After lunch, barley again, you get a lecture on showmanship. Because being a gladiator isn't just about killing, it's about entertaining. You practice bowing to imaginary emperors, posing dramatically before fake kills, and dying convincingly when the crowd demands it. It's less martial arts and more performance art with consequences. At night, you collapse onto your straw mattress, which, to be fair, is softer than the ground you'll soon die on. The other gladiators whisper stories, rumors of men who won their freedom, tales of women who threw roses and scandalous letters into the arena. You pretend to be optimistic. Inside, you're quietly panicking. Days turn into weeks. You get stronger, fitter, angrier. You learn to parry, block, and fake confidence. You even develop a grudging respect for your fellow trainees, except for Marcus, who keeps stealing your sandals. Marcus will accidentally get hit during tomorrow's drills, probably by you. Eventually, your first match arrives. You're given the real gear this time, a proper sword, a shiny helmet, and a pep talk from a trainer who says, "Don't worry. If you die, die loud." You're led through a dark tunnel that smells of iron and incense. You can hear the roar of the crowd above 50,000 Romans chanting for blood, wine sloshing in their cups. When you step into the sunlight, everything slows. The noise hits you like a wave. The sand glitters. The air tastes like dust and adrenaline. Across from you stands your opponent, a man twice your size and probably half as nervous. The referee raises his arm. The trumpet blares. And then it begins. You swing, dodge, stumble. You take a hit. You swing again. The world narrows to a blur of motion, sweat, and survival instinct. You remember your training. You remember not to die quietly. Minutes later, or hours, who knows it's over. You're on one knee, sword trembling. Your opponent lies in the dust. The crowd cheers. You look up, dazed, to see the emperor's hand raised. Thumbs up. You live. The gate opens. You stumble back into the tunnel, shaking, alive. The lanista claps you on the shoulder. "Good work," he says. "Tomorrow you fight again." You nod, exhausted. Somehow you're already dreading it, because that's the secret no one tells you. Gladiators didn't just fight for glory. They fought for rent, for luck, for survival, and for the faint, ridiculous hope that maybe one day they could walk away from this place in one piece. Until then, you keep training, you keep fighting, you keep eating your barley, and you keep hoping Marcus finally stops stealing your sandals. Some Romans attend every fight. They have chants, lucky cloaks, and very strong opinions about sword techniques. One guy hasn't missed a show in 12 years. He smells like olives and obsession. Welcome to the hardcore fanbase, the diehards of the Colosseum. The people who arrive before dawn, who know every gladiator's stats, who claim they can tell when a lion isn't feeling it today. These aren't just spectators. These are the ancient world's most enthusiastic, least showered sports fans. You spot them immediately. They're in the front of the general admission line, despite their seats being assigned by rank. Some wear tunics dyed in the colors of their favorite ludus, gladiator training school. Others come draped in animal pelts, convinced it helps intimidate the leopards. One elderly woman wears a helmet shaped like a dolphin. No one asks why. They all just nod in quiet, confused respect. One man, let's call him Gaius the Enthusiastic, has attended every games day since the Flavian amphitheatre opened. He arrives before sunrise, clutching a homemade banner that reads, "Team Cassius, strike hard, bleed less." He smells faintly of garlic and civic pride. His voice is gone by noon from shouting gladiator nicknames like they're pop stars. His family stopped coming years ago. They say he loves the Colosseum more than he loves them. He doesn't deny it. Superfans don't just watch the games. They live them. They follow their favorite fighters with almost religious fervor. They trade rumors, collect pottery shards with their heroes' faces painted on them, and reenact famous kills in the streets using wooden spoons and very confused stray dogs. If a gladiator switches fighting styles, say, from Retiarius, net and trident, to Murmillo, heavily armored, there will be debates, loud ones, with charts. During intermissions they share gossip like, "Did you hear Titus of Gaul is sleeping with the Lanista's daughter? I heard Spiculus refuses to eat beans before a match, says it messes with his balance." Flammer fake that last fall, obvious dive. You could see the dramatic pause. They also have rituals, carefully practiced traditions to ensure good luck for their favored warriors. Some wear the same unwashed cloak to every fight. Some bring grapes as offerings, not for the gods, but for the gladiators they'll never meet. One man insists on sitting exactly 8 rows from the north gate, because that's where the best kills come from. Statistically unfounded, emotionally unshakable, they chant in unison. Latin catchphrases like pugnate pro gloria, fight for glory, and vincere aut mori, victory or death, echo off the stone. There's even the occasional rhythmic clapping, which usually descends into chaotic slapping of thighs and flagpoles, followed by mild injuries. Some bring homemade merchandise, rough-hewn figurines, hand-stitched dolls, even edible cookies shaped like helmets. Most of these are slightly melted by midday. All of them are sold under the table because technically, only state-sanctioned vendors can profit from the games. Not that anyone enforces it. Not unless they want to start a small riot over poorly glazed ceramic torsos. If their chosen gladiator wins, they erupt, leaping, hugging, occasionally weeping. Gaius once kissed a total stranger on the mouth after his favorite warrior performed a particularly elegant decapitation. He says it was the most romantic moment of his life. The stranger, unfortunately, was his cousin. But if their champion loses, oh dear, there is despair. There is howling. There is the ritual ripping of tunics and the dramatic flinging of olives into the dust. One woman claimed she saw her hero's ghost in a spilled goblet of wine and hasn't stopped sobbing since. She now runs a fan club/religious movement in his name. They meet weekly near the vomitoria. Of course, there's beef between fans. Rivalries that make modern sports hooliganism look like a polite disagreement at a knitting circle. Supporters of the Retiarii hate the Secutores. Fans of wild animal hunters, the Bestiarii, think gladiators are soft, and nobody trusts the chariot racing crowd. Too flashy, they say. No honor, just horses and hair gel. Every so often, someone brings a scroll ancient Roman equivalent of a newsletter. It's filled with doodles of dramatic fight poses and wildly inaccurate statistics like Spiculus has a 97.6% victory rate in matches involving more than 2 ferrets. Scholars believe these were entirely made up, but they did wonders for arena morale. Some superfans dream of becoming gladiators themselves. They train in back alleys with makeshift shields and wooden bats. They write fan fiction in wax tablets, gritty epics, where their self-insert character saves the emperor, slays a tiger, and gets a standing ovation. Sadly, these dreams mostly end with sprained ankles and mild legal trouble. And yet, beneath the body paint and bellowing chants, there's a strange tenderness, a community, a shared love of spectacle, survival, and dramatic sword twirls. These fans may seem unhinged, but in their own olive-stained, sandal-clad way, they're the heartbeat of the Colosseum. So as you sit there, watching Gaius passionately wave a foam trident and shout, "Stab him in the empire," remember, the games weren't just about the fighters. They were about the people who believed in them, cheered for them, and painted their names on bathroom walls. Because what is glory without someone in the crowd to shout, "That's my guy," while dropping a goat leg in excitement? The real unsung heroes. The slaves and workers who sweep, scrub, drag corpses, refill snack carts, and occasionally run screaming from an escaped leopard. Minimum wage? Try zero. Once the roar of the crowd fades, and the last chunk of mystery meat hits the dirt, the real work begins. While Roman citizens stretch, yawn, and waddle home in their wine-soaked togas, a different kind of army enters the arena, not armed with swords, but with brooms, rags, and a haunted look in their eyes. These are the cleaners, the grunts, the human mop brigade. They don't get cheers, they don't get paid. And they definitely don't get to say, "Wow, what a show," because they're the ones who have to scrape "what a show" off the floor. The Colosseum doesn't magically reset itself between spectacles. After a full day of lion attacks, chariot wrecks, public executions, and at least one old man vomiting near the nosebleeds, the place is a battlefield of debris. Bones, broken shields, fish guts, fruit rinds, spilled wine, discarded sandals, and maybe a severed arm or two, all lovingly strewn across 50,000 seats and one very trampled arena floor. The crew? Slaves, condemned prisoners, and laborers from the bottom of the social barrel. They're handed shovels, buckets, and an overwhelming sense of despair. There's no overtime pay, no union. Just a vague hope that tomorrow's tiger doesn't wake up early. Cleaning supplies are, let's say, rudimentary. Picture a broom made from twigs and denial. Buckets are often just reused amphorae that previously held wine or urine, you try not to guess which. Rags are torn tunics. And when something needs to be really scrubbed, knees, elbows, and sheer resentment do the trick. Blood? Everywhere. The sand is soaked with it. And here's a delightful detail. Sometimes the sand needs to be changed. Yes, as in all of it. After especially gruesome events, hundreds of workers have to shovel out the stained sand and haul in fresh, fluffy, beige replacement. If that sounds like beach day, imagine doing it by torchlight while dragging a dead ostrich out of the way. Sometimes the cleanup shift starts before all the animals are fully secured. Leopards, hyenas, and even the occasional cranky elephant have been known to linger. In these cases, workers must decide between bravery and a very fast sprint toward the exit. There are stories whispered over mouldy bread in servant quarters of a man named Lucius who once tamed an angry bear with nothing but a meat skewer and the power of eye contact. No one knows if it's true. But Lucius is now in charge of lion wrangling, which means if you hear him scream, you scream too. Among the horror and refuse, sometimes there's a small silver lining, a dropped coin, a half-eaten fig, a sandal that fits better than your current one. One lucky cleaner reportedly found a senator's missing ring. He returned it and was rewarded with a whole loaf of bread and the day off. He used the bread as a pillow and cried himself to sleep. More often you find things you wish you hadn't. Someone's false tooth, a love letter written on goat parchment, a child's toy doll, sticky with something you really hope is just honey. No candle or perfume known to Rome can mask the stench. The mix of blood, smoke, roasted meat, fear sweat, animal droppings, and that one guy who brought cheese in his tunic, it hangs heavy in the air. Cleaners use crushed herbs, vinegar, and occasionally a splash of wine, if they can sneak it from the vendors, to combat the scent. But mostly, they just stop noticing after the first week. Their nostrils give up, their souls detach. By the time sunrise paints the marble walls golden again, the arena sparkles, or at least glistens less ominously. The sand looks fresh, the seats are passable, the snack carts are restocked. It's like the day before never happened. The audience never knows. They don't see the all-night labor, the aching backs, the whispered curses, the failed attempts to scrape blood out of mosaic tiles with a stick. To the Roman elite, the arena is a magical place of glory and grit. To the cleanup crew, it's Tuesday. The workers don't return home. Most of them live in cramped quarters beneath the arena tucked between animal cages and supply closets. They lie down on hay, close their eyes, and dream of doing literally anything else. Their only consolation? A good day means fewer limbs to haul. A great day means the emperor cancelled the afternoon crucifixions due to rain. But no matter what, tomorrow's show will go on. Which means tonight, someone will have to pick up the bones, mop the blood, and chase the raccoons out of the vendor stands. Again, and again, and again. Because in ancient Rome, glory was for the winners. Everyone else? They cleaned up after it. So tonight, as you curl into your soft, cozy bed with memory foam pillows and absolutely zero risk of getting trampled by an elephant mid-sandwich, take a moment to feel grateful. Grateful that your evening entertainment doesn't involve real swords, airborne hyenas, or someone shouting, "Release the hippopotamus," while you hold a fig in one hand and existential dread in the other. Because while the Colosseum was many things awe-inspiring, violent, weirdly snack-heavy, it was also a reminder of how far humans will go for a bit of spectacle. They engineered trapdoors, imported crocodiles, and built an empire-wide RSVP system. Also, 50,000 people could collectively gasp, while a guy in sandals tried not to get decapitated. And through it all, people cheered. People placed bets. People spilled wine on their tunics and argued over which gladiator had better abs. That's the thing about history. Even at its most horrifying and magnificent, it's also deeply, stupidly human. Loud, messy, a bit theatrical, and somehow always powered by bread, gossip, and someone in the Preda, nosebleeds, yelling, "Do the spinny thing." So maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors tonight. The ones who survived lions, mob politics, and ancient vending machines made entirely of beeswax and ambition. Because history may be brutal, bloody, and baffling, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, clever, and absolutely terrible at planning bathrooms for large crowds. Sleep well, my friend, and may your dreams be lion-free, gladiator-adjacent, and only mildly scented with garum. Good night.